Montana, 1879. A man who buried his heart with his family stands in the rain staring at a woman the world threw away. She's shivering on church steps, left behind, humiliated, alone. He should walk away. He's done with saving people. But something in her broken eyes mirrors his own shattered soul, and in one reckless moment, Jonas Kincaid makes a choice that will ignite a war, rewrite his future, and prove that sometimes the abandoned save each other. Stay until the end and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The storm came early that April, rolling across the Montana high country like God's own fury. Lightning split the bruised sky and thunder shook the timbers of Jonas Kincaid's ranch house as he stood at the window watching darkness swallow the valley. He didn't mind storms. They suited him, violent, solitary, and over when they were over. He was 34 years old and looked 50. Grief had carved lines into his face that no amount of sun or wind could explain. His hands were scarred, his eyes were distant, and his heart had been buried 6 years ago in 2 small graves on the hillside behind the barn. Jonas lived alone. He preferred it that way. The ranch was modest, 300 acres of scrubland and pine. A dozen horses, a small herd of cattle that somehow survived each winter. He worked from dawn until he couldn't see anymore, then ate whatever he could throw together, drank enough whiskey to sleep without dreaming, and started again when the sun rose. He didn't go to town unless he had to. He didn't talk to neighbors unless they cornered him. He didn't go to church, not anymore. Not since the day he buried his wife Sarah and their 4-year-old daughter Emma. Not since he stood over their graves and told God exactly what he thought of a world that let monsters win. So when the pounding came at his door that night, frantic, desperate, barely audible over the howling wind, Jonas's first instinct was to ignore it. But the pounding continued. "Mr. Kincaid, please," Jonas cursed under his breath, grabbed his rifle from above the mantel, and yanked open the door. A boy stood there, maybe 15, soaked to the bone, his horse heaving and wild-eyed behind him. Tommy Fletcher, one of the ranch hands from the Double R spread 10 miles south. "What the hell are you doing out in this?" Jonas growled. It's a woman, sir." Tommy gasped, rain streaming down his face. "At the church in town, she's been left there crying something awful, and nobody knows what to do." "Then get the sheriff." "He's not there. He rode out this morning for Helena won't be back till Monday. And Pastor Williams, he's old, Mr. Kincaid. He don't know what to say to her, and she's just sitting there in the rain and—" "Not my problem." Jonas started to close the door. "Please." The desperation in the boy's voice stopped him. "She's all alone, sir. Just sitting there like she's waiting to die." Jonas stood in the doorway, rain blowing in the boy's words, hanging in the air between them. Just sitting there like she's waiting to die. He knew that feeling. "Christ," Jonas muttered. He grabbed his coat and hat, shoved his feet into his boots, and followed the boy into the storm. So, the ride to town took 45 minutes through mud and lightning. By the time they reached Cedar Bluff's single main street, Jonas was as soaked as the boy, his mood as black as the clouds overhead. The church sat at the end of the road, a small white building with a crooked steeple and a bell that hadn't rung in years. Light glowed weakly through the windows, and on the front steps, barely visible in the rain, sat a woman. She wore white. A wedding dress Jonas realized ruined now, the fabric clinging to her like a second skin, the hem black with mud. Her dark hair hung in wet tangles around her face, and she sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. Jonas dismounted, handed his reins to Tommy, and approached slowly. "Ma'am." She didn't move. He climbed the steps, boots heavy on the wet wood. Up close he could see she was young, mid-20s maybe, with a face that might have been pretty if it wasn't so utterly destroyed by grief. Her eyes were red and swollen, her lips trembling, her whole body shaking with cold. "Ma'am," Jonas said again, softer this time, "you can't stay out here." Finally she looked at him. Her eyes were gray, the color of the storm itself, and when they met his, Jonas felt something shift in his chest, something he hadn't felt in 6 years. Recognition. Not of her face, but of her pain. "He didn't come?" she whispered. Jonas crouched down in front of her, rain hammering his back. "Who didn't come?" "Gerald, my fiancé." Her voice was hollow, distant. "We were supposed to be married today. 3 o'clock. I waited. Everyone waited. The pastor kept saying he was probably delayed by the weather, that he'd be here any minute, but she looked down at her hands, white-knuckled and trembling. He sent a telegram instead. She reached into the folds of her dress and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Jonas took it, tilted it toward the church light, and read, "Evelyn cannot go through with this, have returned to Boston." "Forgive me." Gerald Jonas's jaw tightened. He'd seen a lot of cowardice in his life, but this was a special kind of low. "You got family here?" he asked. She shook her head. "I came from Boston 3 weeks ago. Gerald arranged everything, the train, the boarding house, the wedding. His family owns land west of here. I thought," her voice cracked, "I thought we were going to build a life." "What about your own family?" "My parents died 2 years ago. Fever. I have a brother in Philadelphia, but we don't speak." She looked up at him, and Jonas saw something in her eyes that broke through his carefully constructed walls. "I have nothing, Mr. Kincaid." Jonas Kincaid. Mr. Kincaid. She said his name like it was a lifeline. "I have nothing. No family, no money. Gerald had my ticket, my travel funds. I gave notice at my job in Boston because I thought—" She stopped, pressing her hand to her mouth. "I was so stupid." "You weren't stupid," Jonas said, surprised by the anger in his own voice. "He was a coward and a bastard, and you deserved better." She laughed, a broken, painful sound. "Apparently not." Thunder cracked overhead, and the rain intensified. Jonas looked at the stranger in her ruined wedding dress, shaking with cold and shame and grief, and every instinct he had told him to walk away. He wasn't a savior. He wasn't anyone's hero. He'd failed the 2 people who mattered most, and he had no business trying to help anyone else. But then she looked at him again with those storm-gray eyes, and Jonas heard himself say something he couldn't take back. "Come with me." "Ah." She stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "What? You can't stay here. You'll freeze to death or catch pneumonia." Jonas stood, offering his hand. "I've got a ranch about an hour north. You can stay there tonight, get warm, figure out what to do next." I couldn't possibly." "You got a better option." She looked around at the empty street, the dark windows, the rain hammering down like judgment from above. Then she looked back at Jonas's outstretched hand. Slowly she took it. Her fingers were ice cold, her grip weak. Jonas pulled her to her feet, and she swayed, nearly falling. He caught her by the elbow, steadying her. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked. I don't remember. Yesterday, maybe." Jonas bit back another curse. He turned to Tommy, who'd been watching from under the church eave, wide-eyed and silent. "Go tell your boss I took the lady to my place," Jonas said. "Tell him she's safe, and if anyone comes looking for her, they can find her there." "Yes, sir, Mr. Kincaid." Tommy mounted up and took off into the storm. Jonas turned back to the woman, Evelyn, he reminded himself, and guided her down the steps toward his horse. "Can you ride?" he asked. I think so. It's been a while." "You'll ride with me. Just hold on, and if you start to fall, tell me." He mounted first, then reached down and pulled her up behind him. She was heavier than he expected. The water-soaked dress added 20 pounds at least, but he managed to settle her against his back. After a moment's hesitation, she wrapped her arms around his waist and held on. Jonas kicked the horse into motion, and they rode into the storm. The ride back was harder than the ride in. The rain had turned the road to soup, and Jonas had to guide the horse carefully to avoid the deepest ruts. Behind him, Evelyn held on in silence, her cheek pressed against his back, her whole body shivering so hard he could feel it through his coat. "Talk to me," Jonas said over the wind. "Keep yourself awake." I don't know what to say." "Tell me about Boston. What did you do there?" "I was a seamstress. I worked for a dressmaker in Back Bay, Mrs. Hildebrand. She was kind." Evelyn's voice was faint, dreamy. "I made wedding dresses. Isn't that ironic? How'd you meet Gerald?" "His sister commissioned a dress from Mrs. Hildebrand. I did the fitting. Gerald came to pick her up one day, and She trailed off. "He was charming, polite. He said Montana was the future, that he was building something important, and he wanted someone to build it with. I thought—" "You thought you were getting a life," Jonas finished. "Yes." She pressed her face harder against his back, and Jonas felt wetness that wasn't rain. I was so lonely. My parents were gone. My brother and I fought about the inheritance. He said I was foolish to refuse his help, but I couldn't stay in that house, not after everything. Gerald seemed like an answer. Sometimes answers turn out to be lies, Jonas said quietly. They rode in silence for a while, the storm raging around them. Jonas focused on the trail, on keeping the horse steady, on ignoring the strange feeling of having another person so close after 6 years of being alone. Why are you helping me? Evelyn asked suddenly. Jonas didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure he knew the answer himself. Because nobody else would, he finally said. And because I know what it's like to be left alone in the dark. You've lost someone. It wasn't a question. Jonas felt his chest tighten. Yeah, he said. I have. Evelyn didn't press for details, and Jonas was grateful. They rode the rest of the way in silence through rain and mud and darkness, until finally the lights of his ranch appeared through the trees. The house was small but sturdy. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a main room with a fireplace that Jonas kept burning even in summer because the mountain nights were cold. He dismounted first, then helped Evelyn down. She nearly collapsed when her feet hit the ground, and Jonas had to half carry her up the porch steps and through the front door. Inside, the fire was down to embers. Jonas settled Evelyn into a chair near the hearth, then quickly built up the flames until heat flooded the room. Can you get out of that dress? He asked, not looking at her. I think so. The buttons are in the back. Jonas hesitated, then moved behind her. The buttons were tiny, water-swollen, nearly impossible to manage. His fingers were too big, too clumsy, and after a minute of fumbling, he gave up. I'm going to cut it, he said. No, it's ruined anyway, and you need to get warm now. Jonas grabbed a knife from the kitchen, returned, and carefully sliced through the fabric from neck to waist. The dress fell away in pieces, leaving Evelyn in her soaked chemise and petticoats. Jonas quickly turned away, giving her privacy. I'll get you something dry to wear. He went to his bedroom and pulled out an old shirt and a pair of trousers that would be comically large on her, but they were clean and dry. When he returned, Evelyn was sitting by the fire, trying unsuccessfully to untie her corset laces with shaking hands. Here. Jonas knelt beside her and worked at the knots until they came free. He kept his eyes on his work, his face carefully neutral, but he couldn't help noticing how thin she was, how her ribs stood out beneath the fabric, how her whole body trembled. Once the corset was loose, he handed her the dry clothes and turned his back. Put these on. I'll make you something to eat. In the kitchen, Jonas threw together a meal from what he had: bread, butter, cold chicken from yesterday, cheese, and apple. It wasn't fancy, but it was food. He brought it back to the main room on a wooden plate. Evelyn was dressed now in his shirt and trousers, both hanging off her frame like she was a child playing dress-up. She'd pulled her wet hair back from her face, and in the firelight Jonas could see how truly exhausted she was. Eat, he said, handing her the plate. She took it with both hands and stared at it like she'd forgotten what food was. Then slowly she began to eat small bites at first, then larger ones, until she was devouring the chicken like she hadn't eaten in days. Jonas watched her from across the room, an unfamiliar feeling stirring in his chest. Protectiveness, maybe. Or pity. Or something else he couldn't name. When she finished, she set the plate aside and looked up at him. Thank you, Mr. Kincaid. You didn't have to do any of this. Call me Jonas. Jonas. She smiled, just a small thing, sad and tired but real. I'm Evelyn. Evelyn Hart. I know. You told me. Did I? She looked confused, then embarrassed. I'm sorry. Everything feels foggy. You're exhausted. You need sleep. Jonas gestured toward the hallway. There's a bedroom down there, second door. It's clean, and the bed's made. You can stay as long as you need. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to repay you. Don't worry about that now. Just rest. She stood slowly, swaying on her feet. Jonas started to reach for her, but she steadied herself and nodded. Thank you, Jonas, for everything. She disappeared down the hallway, and a moment later Jonas heard the bedroom door close softly. He stood alone in the firelight, staring at the ruined wedding dress piled on the floor, and wondered what the hell he'd just done. Jonas didn't sleep that night. He sat by the fire listening to the storm rage outside, thinking about the woman asleep down the hall. He should have left her at the church. Someone else would have helped her eventually. The pastor or one of the town women or... But even as he thought it, Jonas knew it was a lie. Nobody would have helped her. Small towns like Cedar Bluff didn't know what to do with abandoned women. They'd have fed her, maybe found her a place to sleep for a night or two, then quietly encouraged her to move along. She had no family, no money, no prospects. She was an embarrassment, a reminder that sometimes good people got thrown away. Jonas knew all about being thrown away. He stared into the flames and let himself remember things he usually kept locked down tight. Sarah's laugh, Emma's small hand in his, the little house they'd lived in outside Cheyenne, the plans they'd made, the future they'd been building. It had been a good life. Simple, but good. And then one night, while Jonas was out tracking rustlers with the territorial marshal, 3 men broke into his house. They were drunk, looking for money and valuables. Sarah tried to fight them. Emma tried to hide. Neither of them survived. Jonas came home to blood and smoke and silence. He buried his family, tracked down 2 of the 3 men and killed them, and would have killed the 3rd if the marshal hadn't stopped him. The law got involved, witnesses disappeared, evidence went missing, and the 3rd man, the leader, the one who'd actually pulled the trigger, vanished into the mountains. 6 years later, Jonas was still looking for him. But in the meantime, he'd built this ranch, this life, this careful solitude, where he didn't have to feel anything, or care about anyone, or risk losing anyone ever again. And now a stranger was sleeping in his daughter's old bedroom, wearing his clothes, trusting him to keep her safe. Jonas stood abruptly and walked to the window. The storm was finally breaking, the rain easing to a drizzle, the sky lightening in the east. Dawn was coming. He should send her away. First thing in the morning, he'd take her back to town, help her contact her brother, or find work, or get a ticket east, whatever she needed to move on with her life. That would be the smart thing to do, the safe thing. But as Jonas stood there watching the sun rise over the mountains, he knew he wasn't going to do it. Not yet. Evelyn woke to sunshine and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling above her was rough-hewn timber. The bed beneath her was narrow and firm, and through the window she could see pine trees and blue sky and mountains that seemed to go on forever. Then memory crashed back: the church, the rain, the telegram, the stranger who'd taken her home. Jonas. Evelyn sat up slowly, wincing at the ache in her muscles. She was still wearing his oversized clothes. Her hair was a tangled mess, and when she caught sight of herself in the small mirror on the wall, she barely recognized the hollow-eyed woman staring back. She looked like someone who'd died and forgotten to lie down. Evelyn closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She could fall apart later. Right now, she needed to pull herself together, thank Mr. Kincaid Jonas for his kindness, and figure out what to do next. She found a brush on the dresser and worked through her hair until it was manageable, then braided it back from her face. The clothes were ridiculous, but they'd have to do. She rolled up the trouser legs and shirt sleeves, cinched the waist as tight as she could, and stepped out into the hallway. The house was quiet. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating a main room that was spare but clean. A sofa, 2 chairs, a table, the fireplace still glowing with coals. The kitchen beyond was small and practical, and through the back window Evelyn could see a barn, a corral with horses, and beyond that, the mountains. It was beautiful. It was also completely isolated. Coffee's on the stove. Evelyn jumped and spun around. Jonas stood in the doorway, hat in hand, boots muddy. He looked like he'd been up for hours, probably had been, if the work clothes and dirt were any indication. "I thank you," Evelyn said. "I'm sorry I slept so late." "It's barely 7. You needed the rest." Jonas hung his hat on a peg by the door and pulled off his boots. "There's bread and butter if you're hungry. I'll make eggs in a minute." "You don't have to." "I'm making them anyway." Evelyn watched as he moved through the kitchen with the easy competence of someone who'd been taking care of himself for a long time. He cracked eggs into a skillet, sliced bread, poured 2 cups of coffee, and within minutes had assembled a simple breakfast that smelled better than anything Evelyn could remember eating. They sat across from each other at the table, and for a few minutes neither spoke. Evelyn ate slowly, savoring each bite, trying not to think about what came next. Finally, Jonas broke the silence. "Storm knocked out the north fence. I've got to ride out and fix it this morning. You can stay here, rest up, or..." He paused, looking uncomfortable. Or I can take you back to town if you want. Evelyn set down her fork. And then what? What do you mean? If you take me back to town, what do? I have no money, no family, no job. Gerald took everything I had, my savings, my ticket, my plans. She heard her voice crack and forced herself to steady it. I'm not asking you to take care of me, Mr. Kincaid Jonas, but I need time to figure out what to do next. Jonas studied her across the table, his dark eyes unreadable. Evelyn had the strange feeling he was seeing right through her past, the calm exterior to the terror underneath. You can stay, he said finally. Few days, maybe a week. Long enough to get your bearings. Relief flooded through her so fast it made her dizzy. Thank you. I'll work cooking, cleaning, whatever you need. I won't be a burden, I promise. You're not a burden, Jonas stood picking up their plates. You're just someone who got dealt a bad hand. Nothing wrong with that. He carried the dishes to the sink, and Evelyn watched him, this strange, scarred man who'd pulled her out of the rain and given her shelter without asking for anything in return. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Jonas turned his hands dripping with dishwater. For a long moment, he just looked at her, and Evelyn saw something flicker in his eyes, pain maybe, or memory. Because 6 years ago I needed help and didn't get it, he said, and I don't want you to end up like I did. Before Evelyn could respond, he'd turned back to the dishes, the conversation clearly over. The days that followed fell into a strange, quiet rhythm. Jonas rose before dawn and worked until dark, fixing fences, tending horses, hauling water, chopping wood. Evelyn watched him from the windows and marveled at how much one man could accomplish alone. He moved with purpose, never wasting motion, never stopping to rest. She tried to make herself useful. The house was clean but neglected, so she scrubbed floors, washed windows, organized the pantry. She found a sewing kit in a cupboard and mended holes in Jonas's shirts. She cooked meals, simple things, but better than what he'd been making himself. Jonas accepted her efforts without comment, but Evelyn could see the small changes in him. He started coming in for lunch instead of working straight through. He talked more, asked questions about Boston, about her work as a seamstress, about her life before Montana. Evelyn, in turn, learned things about him in fragments. He'd been a cavalry scout before settling in Montana. He'd built this ranch himself. He didn't talk to many people. What he didn't talk about was his family. But on the third day, Evelyn found a photograph tucked into a Bible on the shelf, a young woman with dark hair and a laughing smile, holding a little girl who looked just like her. Evelyn put the photograph back without mentioning it, but she understood now. The careful distance, the locked-down grief, the way Jonas looked at her sometimes like she was a ghost he couldn't quite believe in. He'd lost everything, just like she had. On the fourth day, the weather turned warm. Spring finally arrived in full force, bringing green to the hills and wildflowers to the meadows. Evelyn stood on the porch after breakfast, breathing in air that smelled like pine and earth and possibility, and felt something shift inside her. Hope. Fragile, tentative, but real. You planning to stand there all day? Evelyn turned to find Jonas leaning against the porch rail, a faint smile on his weathered face. It was the first time she'd seen him smile, and it transformed him, made him look younger, less haunted. I was just thinking how beautiful it is here, Evelyn said. It's something. Jonas looked out at the mountains, his expression softening. Sarah, my wife, she loved mornings like this. She'd stand right where you're standing and say the mountains look close enough to touch. It was the first time he'd said her name out loud. Evelyn's chest tightened. How long were you married? She asked gently. 7 years, met her in Cheyenne, married her 6 months later. Jonas's voice was distant, remembering. She was stubborn, kind, too good for me. Emma, our daughter, was just like her. What happened? Jonas was quiet for so long Evelyn thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I was gone on a job. 3 men broke into our house. By the time I got back, he stopped jaw tight. I buried them on the hill behind the barn, and I haven't talked to God since. Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. I'm so sorry, Jonas. Me too. He pushed off the railing, his moment of openness closing like a door. I'm riding the south pasture today. You'll be all right here. Of course. But as Jonas saddled his horse and rode off into the trees, Evelyn stood on the porch and wondered if either of them would ever really be all right again. But that night, Evelyn made stew thick with vegetables from the root cellar and tough beef that she slow-cooked until it was tender. Jonas came in just as the sun was setting, dirty and tired, and stopped in the doorway when he smelled the food. "That's—" He trailed off, something unreadable crossing his face. "Too much?" Evelyn asked anxiously. "No, it's good. It's just been a while since—" He removed his hat, ran a hand through his hair. "Since it smelled like home in here." They ate together at the table, talking about small things, the fence that needed replacing, the foal that would be born in a few weeks, the vegetable garden Evelyn wanted to plant if she stayed long enough. "You thinking about staying?" Jonas asked. Evelyn looked up, surprised. "I don't know. I suppose I should start figuring out what comes next. Maybe I could find work in town." "Doing what Cedar Bluff doesn't have a dressmaker, and you said yourself you have no money to start a business. Then I'll find something else. Clean houses, cook, take in laundry. For what, $5 a month and a room in someone's attic?" Jonas set down his fork. "You deserve better than that." "What I deserve and what I can have are two different things," Evelyn said quietly. Jonas was silent, staring at his plate like it held answers. Finally, he looked up, and there was something in his eyes Evelyn couldn't quite read. "Stay here," he said. "Jonas. I mean it. Stay. Not as a guest, as—" He struggled for words. "As a partner. You cook, clean, help around the place. I'll pay you a wage, give you a room, make sure you're taken care of. And when you're ready to figure out what's next, you'll have money and time and a safe place to do it from." Evelyn stared at him, her heart pounding. "Why would you do that?" "Because it makes sense. I need help and you need a place to stay. And because—" Jonas stopped, his jaw working. "Because you shouldn't have to be alone right now. Neither of us should." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Evelyn thought about Boston, about her brother who'd written her off, about Gerald, who'd abandoned her on the steps of a church. She thought about being alone in a strange town with no money and no prospects, about the desperate, terrifying uncertainty of not knowing where her next meal would come from. And then she thought about this quiet man who'd saved her in a storm, who'd given her clothes and food and a place to sleep, who looked at her like she was a person instead of a problem. "All right," she said. "I'll stay." Jonas nodded once, and something like relief crossed his face. "Good. That's good." They finished their meal in comfortable silence, and later, as Evelyn washed dishes and Jonas sat by the fire reading, she felt something she hadn't felt since before her parents died. She felt like she belonged somewhere. The first week became 2, then 3. Spring turned the valley into a riot of green, and Evelyn found herself falling in love with Montana. The mountains that seemed to hold up the sky, the wildflowers that carpeted the meadows, the endless quiet broken only by wind and birdsong. She fell into a routine. Up before dawn to make coffee and breakfast. Mornings spent cleaning, mending, tending the small vegetable garden she'd planted behind the house. Afternoons were for baking bread or preserving food, or helping Jonas with smaller tasks, feeding horses, gathering eggs from the chickens he kept behind the barn. Evenings were the best part. Jonas would come in dusty and tired, and they'd eat together at the table while the sun set over the mountains. They talked about everything and nothing. Books they'd read, places they'd been, dreams they'd had before life got complicated. Jonas was different than Evelyn had first thought. Beneath the silence and the scars, there was dry humor, sharp intelligence, and surprising gentleness. He brought her wildflowers from the meadows. He fixed the rocking chair on the porch so she could sit and watch the stars. He taught her to ride patiently, walking beside her horse until she felt confident enough to go alone. And slowly, carefully, they both began to heal. On a Sunday morning in early May, Jonas surprised her by suggesting they ride to the ridge above the ranch. They packed lunch, saddled the horses, and spent the day exploring trails Evelyn had never seen. At the highest point, they stopped to rest, looking out over the valley spread below them like a painting. "It's so beautiful," Evelyn breathed. "Yeah." But when she glanced over, Jonas was looking at her, not the view. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Recognition possibility. The beginning of something neither had expected. Jonas looked away, first clearing his throat. We should head back. Storm's coming. But as they rode down the mountain, Evelyn couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at her and the way her heart had jumped in response. She wasn't just healing here. She was coming alive. And judging by the way Jonas kept glancing at her when he thought she wasn't looking, she wasn't the only one. The storm Jonas predicted hit that night, not as violent as the one that had brought Evelyn to his door, but steady and relentless. By morning, the roads were impassable, and Jonas announced they were snowed in for at least 2 days. Snowed in. Evelyn looked out at the rain. It's May. Welcome to Montana. Weather does what it wants. Jonas pulled on his coat. I've got to check the animals, make sure the barn's secure. You stay inside where it's warm. But 3 hours later, when Jonas still hadn't returned, Evelyn started to worry. She threw on his spare coat, ridiculously large but warm, and fought her way through the wind to the barn. She found Jonas in one of the stalls, kneeling beside a horse that was clearly in distress. The mare was on her side, breathing hard, her belly distended. The foal, Jonas said without looking up. It's coming early. I need you to get hot water and clean towels. Hurry. Evelyn ran back to the house, her heart pounding. She'd never helped birth an animal before, but she'd watched enough human births in Boston to know the basics. She heated water on the stove, grabbed every clean towel she could find, and rushed back to the barn. For the next 2 hours, Evelyn and Jonas worked together to help the mare through her labor. It was messy, exhausting, and terrifying until finally, with a rush of fluid and one last push, a tiny foal slipped into the world. Jonas caught it, cleared its nose and mouth, and within minutes the foal was breathing, blinking up at them with huge dark eyes. You did it, Evelyn whispered, awed. We did it. Jonas looked at her across the straw-covered floor, his face exhausted and smiling. Thank you. They stayed in the barn until they were sure both mother and foal were stable, then stumbled back to the house, cold, wet, and laughing with relief. Inside, Jonas built up the fire while Evelyn made coffee. They sat side by side on the sofa, wrapped in blankets, watching the flames dance. I never thanked you properly, Evelyn said quietly. For what? For saving me. That night at the church. You didn't have to stop, but you did. You gave me a home when I had nothing, and you asked for nothing in return. She turned to face him. Why, Jonas, really? Jonas was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Because when Sarah and Emma died, I wanted to die too. I thought about it every day for a year, just riding into the mountains and not coming back. But I didn't, because I thought maybe someday I'd have a reason to live again. He looked at her, then his dark eyes full of something that made Evelyn's breath catch. And then you showed up in the rain, and for the first time in 6 years I felt something besides anger and grief. I felt needed, useful, like maybe I could still do something good in this world. Evelyn felt tears spill down her cheeks. You saved me, Jonas. In every way a person can be saved. Maybe, Jonas said softly, or maybe you saved me. They sat there in the firelight, the space between them charged with possibility, and Evelyn knew with absolute certainty that she was falling in love with this broken, beautiful man. And when Jonas reached out and took her hand, threading his scarred fingers through hers, she knew he was falling too. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, in the warm glow of home, 2 lost souls had finally found their way to each other. And for the first time in longer than either could remember, the future didn't look so dark after all. The morning after the storm broke clear and cold, with sunlight turning the rain-soaked valley into a field of diamonds. Jonas woke on the sofa, his back stiff, his hand still tingling from where Evelyn had held it the night before. She'd fallen asleep against his shoulder sometime past midnight, her breathing soft and steady, and Jonas had sat there until dawn, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever fragile thing was growing between them. When she finally stirred, blinking up at him with sleep-hazed eyes, Jonas felt his heart do something dangerous in his chest. Good morning, she murmured, her voice rough with sleep. Morning. Jonas carefully extracted himself and stood needing distance, needing to think. I'll check on the horses. He fled to the barn before she could respond, before he could do something stupid like kiss her or tell her the truth that he'd spent the entire night watching her sleep, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the way her lashes cast shadows in the firelight, the small smile that played at her lips even in dreams. He was in trouble. Deep, terrifying trouble. The mare and foal were doing well, the tiny creature already standing on wobbly legs, nuzzling at its mother for milk. Jonas leaned against the stall door and watched them trying to sort through the chaos in his head. He'd been alone for 6 years. Alone and safe and numb. And now Evelyn was here filling his house with life and warmth and possibility, and Jonas didn't know what the hell to do with any of it. He wanted her. That much was obvious. But wanting and having were two different things, and Jonas knew himself well enough to know he was damaged goods. What did he have to offer a woman like Evelyn? A broken-down ranch in the middle of nowhere? A man who still woke up screaming from nightmares, a future haunted by ghosts. She deserved better. She deserved someone whole. But when Jonas returned to the house and found her in the kitchen making breakfast, humming softly to herself, wearing his shirt and smiling at him like he'd hung the moon, well, maybe he was selfish enough to want her anyway. They ate together in comfortable silence, stealing glances when they thought the other wasn't looking. The air between them felt different now, charged, expectant, like the moment before lightning strikes. "The road should be clear by tomorrow," Jonas said finally. "If you want to go into town, see if there's any news about Gerald." Evelyn's expression hardened. "No, I don't care what happened to him. He made his choice, and I've made mine." "Which is?" She looked at him across the table, her gray eyes steady and sure. "To stay here. To build something real. To stop waiting for my life to start and actually start living it." Jonas felt something loosen in his chest. "You sure?" "I'm sure." Evelyn reached across the table and took his hand, and Jonas marveled at how something so simple could feel so monumental. "Unless you've changed your mind about wanting me here." "No." The word came out rougher than he intended. "No, I haven't changed my mind." They sat there, hands clasped, the future spreading out before them like uncharted territory. Dangerous, uncertain, but undeniably theirs. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The next 3 days were a study in restraint. The storm lingered, trapping them in a world of white and silence, and Jonas found himself hyper-aware of Evelyn's every movement. The way she moved through his house like she belonged there. The way she sang while she worked. The way she looked at him sometimes like she was seeing past all his scars to something worth saving underneath. They cooked together, shoulders brushing in the small kitchen. They sat by the fire reading, sharing the silence. They played cards. Evelyn taught him whist, Jonas taught her poker, and argued good-naturedly about who was cheating. And slowly, carefully, they learned each other. Jonas discovered that Evelyn had a wicked sense of humor buried under all that propriety. She could make him laugh with a single dry observation, could tease him out of his darker moods with nothing but a raised eyebrow and a sardonic comment. Evelyn discovered that Jonas was smarter than he let on. He'd read more books than she had, could quote poetry from memory, and had opinions on everything from politics to philosophy to the best way to train a horse. "You're not what I expected," Evelyn said one evening as they washed dishes side by side. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. A rough cowboy, I suppose. All grunts and silence." She smiled. "You're more complicated than that." Disappointed. Intrigued. She handed him a plate to dry. "Tell me something about yourself, something you've never told anyone." Jonas was quiet for a moment, considering. Then, "I wanted to be a teacher, before the war, before everything. I wanted to teach history, maybe open a school in some small town. Sarah used to tease me about it, said I was too impatient to teach children." Was she right? Probably. Jonas smiled at the memory. "But I think I would have liked it anyway. There's something about passing knowledge on, making sure the next generation does better than we did." Evelyn studied him with new eyes. "You still could. Teach, I mean." "Too late for that now." "Says who?" She turned to face him fully, water dripping from her hands. "Jonas, you're 34 years old. Your life isn't over. You can still do anything you want." "Can I?" Jonas heard the bitterness in his own voice and hated it. "I'm a widower, living alone in the mountains, Evelyn. I've got blood on my hands and ghosts in my head. What school would want someone like me?" "A smart one." Evelyn grabbed a towel and dried her hands, her expression fierce. You're a good man, Jonas Kincaid. You saved my life. You work harder than anyone I've ever met. You're kind and smart and capable, and if you can't see that, then you're not as intelligent as I thought. Jonas stared at her, something warm and dangerous unfurling in his chest. You don't know everything about me. Then tell me. She stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. Tell me all of it. The good and the bad and the ugly. Because I'm not going anywhere, Jonas. I'm here, and I want to know you. All of you. So Jonas told her. They sat by the fire, and he told her about the war, about the things he'd seen and done as a cavalry scout, the friends he'd lost, the innocents that died somewhere between Virginia and Appomattox. He told her about meeting Sarah, about falling in love over Sunday dinners, and stolen kisses behind her father's barn. He told her about Emma's birth, about the terror and joy of holding his daughter for the first time, about the life they'd built in Cheyenne. And then he told her about the night that ended everything. I was out tracking rustlers, Jonas said, his voice flat and distant. Marshal Sutton asked me to guide his posse. We were gone 3 days. When I came home, he stopped, his throat closing. Evelyn took his hand and held it tight. The door was broken. There was blood everywhere. Sarah was in the bedroom. She'd fought them, I could tell from the scratches on the floor, the overturned furniture. Emma was under the bed. She'd tried to hide. Jonas felt tears on his face but couldn't stop them. They shot them both for $23 and a gold watch. That's all our lives were worth to them. $23. Oh, Jonas. Evelyn was crying too, her hand trembling in his. I tracked down 2 of them, killed them both. Would have killed the 3rd, but the marshal stopped me. Said I'd hang if I did it. So the bastard got away, Jack Dawson, leader of the gang. Last I heard, he was hiding somewhere in the mountains, still alive, while my family rots in the ground. I'm so sorry, Evelyn whispered. Me too. Jonas wiped his face roughly. After that, I couldn't stay in Cheyenne. Couldn't stay anywhere with people and noise and memories. So I came here, built this place, and tried to forget. And I was doing fine until I showed up and ruined everything. No. Jonas turned to her, fierce and sure. Until you showed up and reminded me what it felt like to be alive. They sat in the firelight, both crying, both damaged, both choosing against all logic and reason to reach for something better. Your turn, Jonas said finally. Tell me something you've never told anyone. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. Then, I was engaged before Gerald. His name was Thomas. We were going to be married, had the date set, the church reserved. And then my parents got sick. I spent 6 months nursing them, and by the end, she took a shaky breath. Thomas said he couldn't wait anymore, that I'd changed, become too serious, too sad. He broke the engagement 2 weeks after my mother died. Christ. I thought I was broken after that. Thought maybe I was unlovable, that there was something wrong with me that drove people away. When Gerald came along, I was so desperate to prove I wasn't broken that I ignored every warning sign. He was impatient, dismissive, always talking about what he wanted without asking what I wanted. But I told myself it didn't matter because at least someone wanted me. Evelyn, I know now how stupid that was. How I was settling for scraps when I deserved a feast. But at the time, she looked at Jonas, her eyes shining. At the time, I thought it was my last chance, and losing it felt like confirmation that I really was unlovable. Jonas reached out and cupped her face in his hands. You listen to me. You're not unlovable. You're brave and strong and beautiful, and any man who can't see that is a goddamn fool. Thomas was a fool. Gerald was a coward, and if I ever meet either of them, I'll tell them exactly that. Evelyn laughed through her tears. My hero. I mean it. Jonas's thumb brushed her cheekbone, wiping away tears. You deserve everything good, Evelyn. Everything. So do you? She whispered. They sat there, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air, and Jonas felt something shift inside him, a wall crumbling, a door opening, the first tentative steps toward healing. He wanted to kiss her. God, he wanted to kiss her more than he'd wanted anything in years. But he also wanted to do this right. She'd been hurt enough. She deserved courtship and patience and time to be sure. So instead of kissing her, Jonas pulled her close and held her, and they sat by the fire until the logs burned to ash, and the sky outside turned from black to gray to gold. When the storm finally cleared 2 days later, reality came crashing back. Jonas rode into town to pick up supplies and check for mail, leaving Evelyn at the ranch with strict instructions to stay inside and keep the rifle close. He didn't think there was any danger, but 6 years of hypervigilance were hard to shake. Cedar Bluff was bustling when he arrived, ranchers restocking after the storm, townspeople catching up on gossip, children running wild in the sudden sunshine. Jonas hitched his horse outside the general store and went inside, nodding at familiar faces but not stopping to chat. He was loading flour and sugar into his saddlebags when he heard a familiar voice behind him. Well, if it isn't the hermit of the North Country. Jonas turned to find Marshal Tom Sutton leaning against the store counter, grinning. The marshal was 52, gray-haired and whip-thin with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Tom. Jonas. Tom pushed off the counter and approached, lowering his voice. Heard you took in a stray. Young lady left at the church. News traveled fast in small towns. Jonas kept his expression neutral. She needed help. That what we're calling it? Tom's eyes gleamed with amusement. Way I heard it, you rode in like an avenging angel, swept her off her feet, and carried her off into the storm. Very romantic. It wasn't like that. Sure it wasn't. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. I'm glad, Jonas, truly. You've been alone too long. If this girl makes you happy... She's not a girl. She's a woman who got dealt a bad hand. I'm just helping her get back on her feet. Right, and I'm the King of England. Tom's smile faded. Look, I'm not judging. I think it's good you're finally living again. But be careful, all right? People are talking, and not all of it's friendly. You know how small towns are about women living with men they're not married to. Jonas felt anger flash through him. Let them talk. I will, you will, but will she? Tom nodded toward the window. Think about what it's like for her. Strange town, no family, no protection except you. If people start treating her like a fallen woman, they won't. Jonas's voice was hard. Because if anyone says one word against her, they'll answer to me. Tom studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right then. Just wanted to make sure you'd thought it through. He paused. One more thing. Fellow came through last week asking about a woman matching her description. Rich type from Boston, claiming she stole from him. Jonas went very still. Gerald. That his name? He didn't give one. Just said she was mentally unstable, took his money and ran. Asked if anyone had seen her. What did you tell him? That I hadn't seen anyone matching that description, and if I did, I'd verify her identity before turning her over to a stranger with wild accusations. Tom's expression hardened. I don't like men who abandon women and then try to ruin them. But Jonas, if he comes back with proof, he won't, because she didn't steal anything except her own dignity. Jonas grabbed his supplies and headed for the door. Thanks for the warning, Tom. Jonas. The marshal's voice stopped him. If you care about her, and I think you do, make it official. Marry her. Because right now she's vulnerable, and there are people who'll use that against both of you. Jonas didn't answer. He climbed onto his horse and rode out of town. Tom's words echoing in his head. Make it official. Marry her. The thought should have terrified him. 6 months ago it would have. But now, riding through the spring sunshine with thoughts of Evelyn waiting at home, Jonas found it didn't scare him at all. It just felt right. When Jonas returned to the ranch, he found Evelyn on the porch with a woman he didn't recognize. She was older, maybe 45, with kind eyes and a practical manner. They were deep in conversation, drinking tea, and both looked up when Jonas dismounted. Jonas! Evelyn stood smiling. This is Mrs. Margaret Holloway. She owns the farm 5 miles south. She came by to introduce herself. And to offer you a job, Margaret added, extending her hand to Jonas. I hear you're good with horses, Miss Hart. I've got 3 that need training, and my husband's back isn't what it used to be. I can pay $2 a week plus lunch. Nothing fancy, but honest work. Jonas looked at Evelyn and saw excitement in her eyes and something else. Hope. That's very generous, Evelyn said. I'd be happy to help. Excellent. Can you start Monday? I'll send my son to fetch you in the mornings and bring you back in the evenings. It'll be 4 days a week to start more if things work out. After Margaret left, Jonas found Evelyn standing in the kitchen, staring out the window with a complicated expression. "You don't have to take it if you don't want to," he said. "I want to." She turned to face him. "I need to, Jonas. I can't just live here indefinitely without contributing. This way I'll have my own money, my own purpose, and people will stop talking." "People are already talking." "I know." Evelyn's jaw set. "Mrs. Holloway told me. She said some of the town women think I'm taking advantage of you. Others think—" She stopped, color rising in her cheeks. "Think what? That we're living in sin." She said it matter-of-factly, but Jonas could see the hurt underneath. "That I'm your mistress or some sort of fallen woman, Mrs. Holloway said she doesn't believe a word of it, but that I should know what's being said." Jonas felt rage surge through him. "I'll go back to town right now and tell those gossips exactly what I think." "No." Evelyn caught his arm. "That'll only make it worse. The best thing I can do is prove them wrong. Show them I'm respectable, hardworking, independent. This job will help with that." "You shouldn't have to prove anything." "Maybe not, but I want to." She squeezed his arm gently. "I want to build a life here, Jonas. A real life, not one where I'm hiding or dependent or afraid. And part of that means earning my own way." Jonas understood. He didn't like it, but he understood. "All right," he said. "But you come straight home if anyone gives you trouble, and if Gerald shows up—" "Gerald?" Evelyn went pale. "Why would he—" Jonas told her about the man who'd come to town asking questions. Evelyn listened in silence, her face growing harder with each word. "He thinks I stole from him," she said flatly. "Unbelievable." Tom didn't believe him, but others might. Evelyn sank into a chair. "God, Jonas, what if he causes real trouble? What if he gets the law involved, makes accusations I can't prove false? Then we'll deal with it." Jonas knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "Together. I won't let him hurt you, Evelyn. I promise." She looked at him with those storm-gray eyes, and Jonas saw fear there, but also trust. She believed him. She believed he'd protect her. The weight of that trust was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "Thank you," Evelyn whispered. Jonas wanted to say more, wanted to tell her how he felt, wanted to make promises about the future, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he just held her hands and hoped she understood. The following Monday, Margaret's son Daniel arrived at dawn to collect Evelyn. He was a cheerful 18-year-old with his mother's kind eyes and his father's work ethic. Jonas watched them ride off together, fighting the irrational urge to follow and make sure she was safe. The day dragged without her. Jonas worked himself to exhaustion, fixing things that didn't need fixing, cleaning things that were already clean, anything to avoid thinking about how empty the house felt. When Daniel brought her back that evening, Evelyn was exhausted but glowing. "It was wonderful," she told Jonas over dinner. "The horses are beautiful and Mrs. Holloway is so kind. She taught me her method for gentle braking, and I managed to get the gelding to accept a halter by lunchtime. Daniel says that's practically a miracle." Jonas listened to her chatter about her day and felt something warm spread through his chest. This was what healing looked like. This was what moving forward felt like. And he wanted more of it. Over the next 3 weeks, a new routine emerged. Evelyn worked at the Holloway farm 4 days a week and spent the other 3 at Jonas's ranch. Sunday became their day. They went to church together in the morning, ignoring the stares and whispers, then spent the afternoon writing or reading or just sitting on the porch watching the mountains. Jonas found himself living for those Sundays. He'd tell himself all week that he was being ridiculous, that he was too old and too damaged for this, that he should let her go before he hurt her. But then Sunday would come and Evelyn would smile at him across the breakfast table, and all his carefully constructed defenses would crumble. He was in love with her, completely, irrevocably in love. The realization hit him one Sunday evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. Evelyn was reading aloud from a book of poetry. Her voice soft and musical, and Jonas was watching her face in the golden light, and suddenly he knew this was it. This was the rest of his life if he was brave enough to reach for it. "Evelyn," he said, interrupting her mid-stanza. She looked up startled. "Yes. Come riding with me. There's something I want to show you. They saddled the horses and rode up into the hills as the sun sank lower. Jonas led her to a meadow he'd found years ago, a secret place where wildflowers grew thick and a stream cut through the grass like a silver ribbon. It's beautiful, Evelyn breathed. Sarah loved it here, Jonas said. I used to bring her and Emma for picnics. After they died, I couldn't come back. It hurt too much, but today, he looked at Evelyn, his heart pounding. Today I wanted to share it with you. Evelyn dismounted and walked to the edge of the stream, trailing her fingers through the water. Thank you for trusting me with this. Jonas dismounted too, joining her by the water. I trust you with more than that. She turned to face him, questions in her eyes. I'm not good with words, Jonas said, struggling. I'm better with actions, with doing things. But I need you to understand something. These past weeks with you they've been the happiest I've been in 6 years. You make me want to be better. You make me want to live again, not just exist. And I know I'm older and damaged and not what you probably imagine for yourself, but Jonas, Evelyn pressed her fingers to his lips, stopping the flood of words. Do you know what I see when I look at you? He shook his head, not trusting himself to speak. I see a man who saved my life, who took me in when I had nothing, who works until his hands bleed to make something good in this world, who loved his family so much that losing them nearly destroyed him, but who's brave enough to risk his heart again anyway. She moved closer, her hand sliding from his lips to cup his face. I see the man I'm falling in love with. Jonas stopped breathing. You're what? I'm falling in love with you, Jonas Kincaid. Have been since you pulled me out of the rain. And if you're asking what I think you're asking, Jonas kissed her. He'd meant to be gentle, careful, respectful. But 6 years of loneliness and grief and hunger surged up inside him, and the kiss turned desperate fierce, all the words he couldn't say translated into touch. Evelyn kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jonas rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. I know it's fast and I know I'm not much of a prize, but I swear I'll spend every day of my life making you happy. Marry me, Evelyn. Yes. She was crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, of course, yes. Jonas swept her into his arms and kissed her again, and this time it was tender, reverent, a promise sealed in the fading light. When they finally pulled apart, the sun had set completely, and stars were beginning to emerge above the mountains. We should get back, Jonas said, though he made no move to release her. We should, Evelyn agreed, making no move to step away. They stood there in the meadow, wrapped in each other's arms, and for the first time in longer than either could remember, the future looked bright. The next morning, Jonas rode into town to speak with Pastor Williams about arranging a wedding. He found the old pastor in his church sweeping the floor and nearly lost his nerve 3 times before finally blurting out his request. Pastor Williams listened in silence, then set down his broom and looked at Jonas with knowing eyes. Son, I've watched you for 6 years, watched you carry grief like a stone around your neck, and I've seen you these past months with Miss Hart, seen the way you look at her the way she looks at you. He smiled. It's about time you asked. You'll do it then, marry us. I will. But Jonas, are you sure the town's been talking and marriage won't stop all the gossip? Ma, I don't care about gossip. I care about her. And I want everyone to know she's mine, that she's protected, that anyone who wants to hurt her has to go through me first. Pastor Williams nodded slowly. Then we'll do it proper, 2 weeks from Saturday. That'll give me time to read the banns, give people time to adjust to the idea. 2 weeks. Jonas felt a grin spread across his face. I can do 2 weeks. He rode back to the ranch feeling lighter than he had in years, but his good mood evaporated when he saw Tom Sutton's horse tied to the porch rail. Jonas dismounted quickly and went inside to find the marshal sitting at his kitchen table, hat in hand with Evelyn pale and shaking across from him. What happened? Jonas demanded. Tom stood. Gerald Hart came back. He's at the hotel in town, and he's got papers, a marriage contract signed by Evelyn Travel Expenses. He paid money he claims she stole. He's threatening legal action if she doesn't return his property. Jonas felt rage surge through him. She's not his property. Legally, that's complicated. They were engaged, he paid certain expenses. And if this marriage contract is legitimate, it's not. Evelyn said, her voice shaking. I never signed any contract. Gerald mentioned a mutual understanding, but there was nothing legal. Can you prove that? Tom asked gently. Evelyn's silence was answer enough. He's lying, Jonas said flatly. And even if he's not, even if she did sign something, she doesn't owe him anything. He abandoned her. I know that, Jonas, you know that, but the law… Tom sighed. Look, I came here to warn you. Gerald's talking about getting a judge involved, maybe even having Evelyn arrested for theft. It's all bluster probably, but the man's got money and connections. He could make life very difficult. Let him try. Jonas moved to stand behind Evelyn, his hands on her shoulders. She's under my protection now, and in 2 weeks she'll be my wife. Let's see him argue with that. Tom's eyebrows rose. You're getting married. We are. Jonas squeezed Evelyn's shoulders gently. Pastor Williams agreed to perform the ceremony 2 weeks from Saturday. Well then. Tom stood, a smile breaking across his face. Congratulations. And Jonas? That solves a lot of problems. Once you're married, Gerald's got no legal claim to her at all. After Tom left, Jonas knelt in front of Evelyn and took her hands. She was still trembling, her face pale. He's not going to hurt you, Jonas said firmly. I won't let him. You heard the marshal. Gerald has money connections. What if he can prove I stole from him? What if… Did you? No, of course not. Then we'll prove that. And even if we can't, even if he makes trouble, we'll handle it together. Jonas pulled her into his arms. 2 weeks, Evelyn. In 2 weeks, you'll be my wife, and no one can touch you. She clung to him, her face pressed against his chest. I'm afraid, Jonas. What if he ruins everything? What if he takes me away or gets you in trouble, or… He won't. Jonas tipped her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen to me. I've faced down rustlers, outlaws, and entire Comanche war parties. I tracked killers through the mountains and fought in a war that nearly destroyed this country. One spoiled rich boy from Boston doesn't scare me. You're mine now, Evelyn, and I protect what's mine. She searched his face, then slowly nodded. All right, I believe you. Good. Jonas kissed her forehead. Now, let's figure out how to fight back. They spent the evening going through everything Evelyn could remember about her arrangement with Gerald. She'd kept his letters, flowery, romantic things full of promises about their future together. Jonas read them with mounting disgust. He's a manipulator, Jonas said, tossing the letters aside. He dangled the promise of security and love, got you to come all the way out here, then abandoned you when it wasn't convenient anymore. And now he's trying to save face by claiming you wronged him. But how do we prove that? So we don't have to prove it. We just have to cast enough doubt that no judge will take his case seriously. Jonas pulled out paper and a pen. Let's make a list of everyone who can testify about what happened, Pastor Williams, the boarding house owner, anyone who saw you at the church that day. They worked late into the night building Evelyn's defense. By the time they finished, Jonas was confident they had enough to counter any claim Gerald might make. But as he lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, Jonas couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. Gerald wouldn't have come back unless he thought he could win. The man was a coward, but he wasn't stupid. Whatever Gerald was planning, it was bigger than a simple legal claim. And Jonas needed to be ready. Jonas's instincts proved right. 3 days later, when Gerald Hart showed up at the ranch. It was mid-morning, and Jonas was working in the barn when he heard the sound of hooves. He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow, and watched a rider approach, tall, well-dressed, sitting his expensive horse like he owned the world. Gerald Hart was exactly what Jonas had imagined. 28, maybe 30, with carefully styled blonde hair, a tailored suit that probably cost more than Jonas made in 6 months, and the kind of smooth, handsome face that women probably found charming until they realized there was nothing behind it. Jonas walked out to meet him, his hand resting casually on the knife at his belt. Can I help you? Jonas kept his voice level, controlled. Gerald dismounted with practiced ease and looked around the ranch with barely concealed disdain. You must be Kincaid. I'm Gerald Hart. I believe you have something that belongs to me. If you're talking about Miss Hart, she doesn't belong to anyone. Miss Hart, Gerald laughed, the sound sharp and unpleasant. Is that what she's calling herself now? How quaint. Tell me, has she mentioned our engagement? The money I spent bringing her here, the promises she made. She mentioned you abandoned her at a church. Jonas took a step forward. Left her crying in the rain like she was nothing. That about cover it. Gerald's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. She's told you her version, I see. Let me tell you mine. Evelyn Hart is emotionally unstable. She became obsessed with me after a single meeting, forged correspondence to make our relationship seem more serious than it was, and stole nearly $500 from my travel funds. When I discovered the theft, I ended our arrangement. She retaliated by staging that pathetic scene at the church to humiliate me. Jonas felt rage surge through him, hot and dangerous. That's a damn lie. Is it? Can you prove it? Gerald reached into his coat and pulled out a sheaf of papers. I have a signed agreement from Evelyn acknowledging receipt of travel funds. I have bank records showing money withdrawn from my account. I have witnesses who will testify to her erratic behavior. What do you have, Mr. Kincaid? The word of a woman desperate enough to attach herself to the first man who showed her kindness. Get off my land. Not until I get what I came for. Gerald's voice hardened. I want my money back, and I want Evelyn to admit what she did. Otherwise, I'll take this to a judge, and she'll spend the next year in prison for theft. She didn't steal from you. Prove it. Gerald smiled again, and Jonas wanted nothing more than to wipe that smile off his face with his fists. You can't, can you? Because deep down, you know I'm right. You know she's using you just like she tried to use me. How long do you think it'll be before she disappears with your money, too? Jonas closed the distance between them, in 2 strides, his hand fisting in Gerald's expensive lapels. Listen to me, you spineless piece of... Jonas, don't! Evelyn's voice cut through his rage. Jonas turned to see her standing on the porch, her face pale but determined. She walked down the steps slowly, her eyes never leaving Gerald. Hello, Gerald. Evelyn? Gerald straightened his coat where Jonas had wrinkled it, his composure returning. You're looking well. Frontier life suits you. What do you want? What I've always wanted, honesty, justice, my money back. I didn't take your money. Then where is it? Gerald pulled out another paper, waving it at her. $500, Evelyn, gone from my account the day before our wedding. And according to the boarding house owner, you left without paying your final week's rent. Coincidence. Jonas saw Evelyn's hands tremble, saw doubt flicker across her face, and knew Gerald saw it too. The bastard smiled. You don't even remember, do you? Gerald's voice softened, turned almost pitying. You've been under such strain, darling. Your parents' deaths, the move west, all those expectations. Sometimes when people are under pressure, they do things they don't remember. It's not your fault. You were confused, frightened. I understand. Don't you dare, Evelyn said, her voice shaking. Don't you dare twist this around. You invited me here. You paid for my travel. You proposed marriage. And then you abandoned me without explanation, without apology, without even the courage to face me. Whatever money is missing, I didn't take it. Then who did? Gerald spread his hands reasonably. The bank has records, Evelyn. The money was withdrawn. If you didn't take it, surely you can explain what happened to it. Evelyn opened her mouth, then closed it again. Jonas saw panic flash across her face and stepped in. Maybe you took it yourself, Jonas said. Maybe you're running a con, get a desperate woman out here, take her money, abandon her, then come back claiming she stole from you. Wouldn't be the first time some rich bastard blamed his mistakes on a woman. Gerald's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing pure hatred underneath. Careful, Kincaid. Slander is actionable, and you're already on thin ice harboring a known thief. She's not a thief. Then prove it. Let her come back to Boston with me. We'll sort this out with a proper investigation, and if she's innocent, she'll have nothing to fear. She's not going anywhere with you. Jonas moved to stand beside Evelyn, his presence a wall between her and Gerald. In 2 weeks, she's going to be my wife. After that, any claims you have die with our marriage. So I suggest you take your lies and your fake papers and get the hell out of Montana before I make you leave. Gerald stared at them both, his jaw tight. Then he smiled again, and this time it was genuinely amused. Your wife. How romantic. Tell me, Kincaid, what exactly are you? Some broken-down rancher living in the middle of nowhere. A hermit everyone in town whispers about. I've heard the stories. I know what happened to your family. Tragic, truly. But what makes you think you can protect her when you couldn't even protect them? Jonas moved before he could think. His fist connected with Gerald's jaw with a satisfying crack, sending the man sprawling in the dirt. Jonas! Evelyn grabbed his arm, but Jonas was already standing over Gerald, breathing hard. Get up, Jonas growled. Get on your horse and ride out, or I swear to God I'll break more than your jaw. Gerald wiped blood from his lip, his eyes murderous. He climbed to his feet slowly, gathering his reins. You'll regret that, Gerald said quietly. Both of you. I came here offering a peaceful solution, but if you want war, I'll give you war. I'll drag both your names through every court and newspaper in the territory. By the time I'm done, no one will hire you. No one will do business with you, and everyone will know exactly what kind of woman spreads her legs for any man who offers shelter. Jonas lunged again, but Evelyn held him back with surprising strength. Let him go, she said firmly. He's not worth it. Gerald mounted his horse, still smiling despite his split lip. 2 weeks you said I'll be back before then, with a judge with papers with everything I need to see justice done. Enjoy your little fantasy while it lasts. He wheeled his horse around and galloped away, leaving Jonas and Evelyn standing in the dust. Jonas turned to Evelyn, ready to apologize for hitting Gerald, ready to promise he'd fix this, but the words died when he saw her face. She wasn't crying or angry or afraid. She was furious. Did you take his money? Jonas asked quietly. No. Evelyn met his eyes without flinching. I swear to you, Jonas, I never touched his money. I don't know what happened to it, but I didn't take it. I believe you. Do you? Because for a moment there, I believe you, Jonas repeated firmly. He pulled her into his arms, felt her trembling against him. Whatever Gerald's planning, we'll face it together. I promise. But even as he held her, Jonas couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. Gerald was too confident, too sure of himself. He had something planned, something bigger than legal papers and accusations. Jonas just didn't know what it was yet. That night, Jonas rode into town to speak with Tom Sutton. He found the marshal at his office going through wanted posters with a frown. Tom, I need to know everything about Gerald Hart. Who he is, who he knows what kind of power he has. Tom looked up, taking in Jonas's bruised knuckles and grim expression. What happened? Jonas told him about Gerald's visit, the threats, the accusations. Tom listened in silence, his frown deepening. The Hart family owns half of Montana, Tom said finally. Cattle ranches, mining operations, land holdings. They've got connections all the way to Washington. If Gerald wants to make trouble, he can. Can he get a judge to rule in his favor, even without proof? With enough money and the right judge. Maybe. Tom leaned back in his chair. But Jonas, that's not what worries me. What do you mean? Tom pushed a wanted poster across the desk. Jonas looked down and felt his blood run cold. The face staring back at him was older, harder, more scarred, but unmistakable. Jack Dawson. The man who'd killed his family. He's been spotted in the territory, Tom said quietly. Him and what's left of his gang. They've been hitting farms and small ranches up north, always moving, always staying ahead of the law. Last week they killed a family outside Helena. Same pattern as before, broke in at night, shot everyone, took what little money they had. Jonas stared at the poster, his hand shaking. 6 years. 6 years of searching, of hoping, of planning what he'd do when he finally found this bastard. Where is he now? Jonas's voice was rough, barely controlled. We don't know. He moves fast, never stays in one place. But Jonas... Tom leaned forward, his expression grave. If he's in the area, and if he finds out you're here, he'll come for me. Jonas looked up, meeting Tom's eyes. He'll finish what he started. That's what I'm afraid of. You need to be careful. Keep your eyes open. And maybe... Tom hesitated. Maybe postpone the wedding. Get Evelyn somewhere safe until this is over. No. Jonas's voice was hard. I'm not running, and I'm not putting my life on hold because some murdering bastard might show up. Evelyn and I are getting married in 2 weeks. Dawson can go to hell. Jonas, I'm done hiding Tom. I'm done living in fear. If Dawson comes, I'll be ready. Tom studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but I'm deputizing some men to patrol the valley, and you keep that rifle loaded and close. Jonas rode home through darkness, his mind churning. Two threats now, Gerald Hart with his money and influence, and Jack Dawson with his guns and hate. Either one alone would be dangerous. Together they could destroy everything Jonas had built. But as he rode up to his ranch and saw lamplight glowing in the windows, saw Evelyn moving past the glass like a shadow given life, Jonas felt his resolve harden. He'd lost everything once. He wouldn't lose it again. Whatever came, he'd be ready. The next week passed in tense anticipation. Jonas taught Evelyn to shoot, spending hours in the meadow until she could hit targets with reasonable accuracy. He reinforced the doors and windows, checked his ammunition, and made plans for every possible attack scenario. Evelyn threw herself into wedding preparations with fierce determination. She sewed a dress from fabric Margaret Holloway donated, simple but beautiful. She invited the few friends she'd made in the valley. She acted like everything was normal, like they weren't facing threats from multiple directions. But Jonas saw the fear in her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. He saw the way she jumped at sudden noises, the way she checked the windows constantly, the way she held on to him at night like he might disappear. On Tuesday, 5 days before the wedding, the first farm was hit. The Hendersons lived 15 miles north, a young couple with 2 small children trying to scratch out a living on hard land. Jonas heard about it from Margaret's son Daniel, who rode to the ranch at dawn with news. "They're all dead," Daniel said, his young face pale and shocked. "The whole family. Marshall found them this morning. House was ransacked. Barn was burned. Whoever did it took everything horses' cattle money. Everything." Jonas felt ice settle in his gut. "Did Tom say who?" "He thinks it was Dawson's gang. Same pattern as the other raids. They hit fast at night, kill everyone, disappear before dawn." Daniel swallowed hard. "Mr. Kincaid, the marshal's calling a meeting. All the ranchers and farmers, tonight at the church. He wants to organize patrols, get people protected." After Daniel left, Jonas found Evelyn in the kitchen, gripping the counter with white knuckles. "This is because of you," she said quietly. "Dawson knows you're here. He's going to keep killing until he draws you out." "We don't know that." "Yes, we do." Evelyn turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "Jonas, people are dying. Families are dying. If we call off the wedding, if I leave—" "No." Jonas crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. "This isn't your fault, and leaving won't stop him. Dawson's a killer. He doesn't need reasons beyond money and violence. If he's here, and we'll deal with him." "How?" "He has a gang. You're one man." "I'm not alone. Tom's organizing the valley. We'll have patrols, guards, warning systems. And I've survived worse than Jack Dawson." But that night at the church meeting, Jonas realized how much worse this could get. Every rancher and farmer in the valley had turned out maybe 40 men, plus wives and older children. Tom Sutton stood at the front, his face grim, explaining the situation. "Jack Dawson's gang has been operating in Montana territory for 6 years. They've killed at least 20 people that we know of, probably more. They hit at night, target isolated homesteads, move fast. They're smart, organized, and extremely dangerous." "What do we do?" someone called out. "We organize. Everyone travels in groups. No one goes anywhere alone. We set up a rotation for night patrols. Every homestead gets at least 2 armed men staying overnight until this is over. We send riders to Helena for help from the territorial militia." "That'll take weeks," another voice protested. "How many more families die while we wait?" "We do the best we can," Tom said firmly. "But make no mistake, these men are killers. Professional killers. If you see them, you don't try to be a hero. You shoot first and shoot straight, because they will not hesitate to kill you and everyone you love." Jonas felt Evelyn's hand slip into his, cold and trembling. He squeezed it gently, trying to project a confidence he didn't entirely feel. After the meeting, Tom pulled Jonas aside. "I need to tell you something," the marshal said quietly. "Gerald Hart left town this morning, took the stage east, said he'd be back in a week with federal marshals and warrants. Let him come." "Jonas, that's not all. Before he left, he was asking questions about you, about your past, about what happened to your family. He was very interested in Jack Dawson." Jonas went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying Gerald Hart is smart and vindictive, and he knows exactly how to hurt you. If he finds a way to contact Dawson to tell him where you are, he'd lead a gang of killers straight to me. Jonas felt sick. Christ, Tom, he'd get people killed just to get revenge on me and Evelyn. I don't have proof, but be careful and be ready. Jonas rode home in the darkness with Evelyn silent beside him, both of them lost in their own dark thoughts. When they reached the ranch, Jonas did a full perimeter check while Evelyn locked all the doors and windows. They didn't talk about what they were both thinking, that Gerald Hart might be more than just a threat to their happiness. He might be a threat to their lives. 3 days before the wedding, the second farm was hit. Then the third, then the fourth. Each attack was the same night raids. Entire families killed, everything of value stolen. The valley descended into panic. Families abandoned their homes and fled to town. Those who stayed armed themselves and slept in shifts. The patrols Tom organized found nothing. Dawson's gang was too smart, too fast, always staying ahead of them. And with each attack, Jonas felt the noose tightening. On Thursday evening, 2 days before the wedding, Margaret Holloway arrived at Jonas's ranch with her entire family, husband, 3 sons, a daughter. They looked exhausted and frightened. We can't stay at our place anymore, Margaret said. We're too isolated, too vulnerable. Marshall suggested we consolidate, get everyone into a few defendable locations. Your ranch has good sight lines, water supplies. Can we stay? Of course. Jonas helped them unload their wagon. We'll make room. By nightfall, the ranch held 12 people. Jonas organized watch rotations, positioned rifles at strategic windows, and tried to project calm while his instincts screamed danger. He found Evelyn sitting on the porch alone, staring out at the darkness. We should postpone the wedding, she said without looking at him, until this is over. No. Jonas, no. He sat beside her, taking her hand. Dawson wins if we let him control our lives. Gerald wins if he makes us afraid. We're getting married Saturday like we planned, in the church with our friends in front of God and everyone, because that's how we take our lives back. Evelyn turned to look at him, moonlight illuminating her face. What if something happens? What if? Then we'll face it together, as husband and wife. Jonas kissed her gently. I love you, Evelyn Hart, and I'm not waiting one more day than necessary to make you mine. She leaned against him, and they sat together in the darkness, listening to the night sounds and trying not to think about what morning might bring. Friday arrived with clear skies and false calm. Jonas spent the day securing the ranch, checking weapons, drilling everyone on what to do if they were attacked. Margaret and her daughter helped Evelyn with final wedding preparations. The older boys took their turns on watch. Everyone tried to act normal. They almost succeeded. Dinner that night was crowded, but cheerful Margaret had made stew. Evelyn had baked bread, and for a few hours they could pretend they were just neighbors sharing a meal, instead of potential victims huddled together for protection. Jonas was washing dishes when Tom Sutton arrived, riding hard. We found them, Tom said without preamble. Dawson's gang. They're camped in the canyon 15 miles north. I've got 20 men ready to ride. We're going to end this tonight. Jonas felt something dark and hungry stir in his chest. I'm coming. I figured you'd say that. Tom looked at Evelyn, who'd appeared in the doorway. Miss Hart, I need you to stay here with the Holloways. Keep the ranch locked down tight. We'll be back before morning. Don't go, Evelyn said, looking at Jonas. Please, let someone else. I have to. Jonas moved to her, gripping her shoulders. This ends tonight. Dawson dies and we can finally have a life without looking over our shoulders. What if you don't come back? I will. Jonas kissed her hard. I promise. I will come back to you. Within the hour, Jonas rode out with Tom and 20 armed men. They moved through darkness toward the canyon, every man silent and grim. Jonas checked his rifle for the 100th time, thinking about Sarah and Emma, about 6 years of grief and rage, about the man who'd taken everything from him. Tonight, Jack Dawson would answer for his crimes. Tonight, it would finally be over. They reached the canyon at midnight and found it empty. They were here, one of the scouts reported. Campfires still warm tracks leading south. They moved out maybe 2 hours ago. South, Tom's face went pale. Christ, the valley! They're not running, they're attacking. Jonas felt his blood turn to ice. Evelyn. He kicked his horse into a gallop, racing back toward his ranch with Tom and the others close behind. Every second felt like an eternity. Every mile stretched into infinity. Jonas's mind conjured horrible images, Evelyn screaming, the ranch burning blood and death, and his failure to protect the people who mattered. Not again. God, please, not again. They crested the final ridge and saw smoke rising from multiple locations across the valley. Fires burned at 3 different homesteads. In the distance, Jonas could hear gunfire. They're hitting everyone, Tom said in horror. It's not one attack, it's coordinated. They're trying to destroy the whole valley. Split up, Jonas ordered. Cover as much ground as possible. I'm going to my ranch. He didn't wait for agreement. He just rode, pushing his horse to its limits, praying he wasn't too late. The ranch appeared through the smoke, still standing, no visible fire. Jonas's heart leaped with hope until he saw the broken front door, heard the screaming from inside. He was off his horse before it stopped moving, rifle in hand, running toward the chaos. The main room was a battlefield. Margaret's husband lay bleeding by the fireplace. The oldest Holloway boy was fighting hand-to-hand with a man twice his size. Through the kitchen doorway, Jonas could see more figures struggling. And in the center of it all, held by a scarred, grinning man Jonas recognized from 6 years of nightmares, was Evelyn. Jack Dawson had a gun to her head. Jonas Kincaid, Dawson said, his voice rough and amused. Been looking for you. Finally found you. And look what pretty bait fell into my lap. But Jonas raised his rifle, but Dawson just laughed and pressed his gun harder against Evelyn's temple. Go ahead, shoot. But you'll hit her, not me. I've gotten real good at using shields these past few years. Let her go. Jonas's voice was deadly calm. Your fight's with me, not her. My fight's with whoever I say it's with. Dawson dragged Evelyn toward the door, his men falling back to cover his retreat. You took 2 of my boys 6 years ago, shot them down like dogs. Now I'm going to take everything from you just like you tried to take everything from me. You killed my family. They were in the way. Dawson's grin never wavered. Just like this pretty thing's going to be in the way once I'm done with her. Unless you want to make a deal. What kind of deal? Jonas kept his rifle trained on Dawson, looking for any opening. You for her. Come with me. Let me kill you slow like you deserve, and I'll let the girl go. Maybe. If I'm feeling generous. Don't listen to him, Jonas. Evelyn struggled against Dawson's grip. He'll kill us both. Shut up. Dawson hit her with the gun and Evelyn cried out. Jonas felt rage explode through him, pure and incandescent. I'll kill you, Jonas said quietly. If you hurt her again, I will tear you apart with my bare hands. Big words from a man with no cards. Dawson kept backing toward the door, his men providing cover. You got 10 seconds to decide, Kincaid. 10 seconds, then I put a bullet in her pretty head, and Evelyn moved. Jonas never saw exactly what she did, some combination of elbow and twist and desperate strength, but suddenly Dawson was stumbling backward, his grip loosening for just a moment. Jonas fired. The bullet took Dawson in the shoulder, spinning him around. Evelyn broke free, diving to the floor. Dawson's men opened fire, and the ranch erupted into chaos. Jonas threw himself behind the overturned table as bullets tore through the wood. He returned fire, methodically dropping 2 of Dawson's men with precise shots. Through the smoke and noise, he saw Evelyn crawling toward Margaret's daughter, pulling the girl to safety behind the sofa. Fall back! Dawson was screaming, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Fall back now! His remaining men fought their way to the door, laying down, covering fire. Jonas tried to get a clean shot at Dawson, but there were too many bodies, too much chaos. And then they were gone, disappearing into the night, taking 2 stolen horses and leaving 3 dead men behind. Jonas was on his feet, immediately running to Evelyn. She was shaking, blood on her face from where Dawson had hit her, but alive. Whole. Are you all right? Jonas pulled her into his arms, his hands roaming over her, checking for injuries. I'm fine. But Mr. Holloway... Jonas turned to see Margaret bent over her husband, pressing cloth to a wound in his side. Jonas grabbed his medical supplies and went to help, working to stop the bleeding, while Margaret held her husband's hand and whispered reassurances. Outside, more gunfire echoed through the valley. Tom and the others were still fighting Dawson's men at other homesteads. The night was far from over. But Jonas looked at Evelyn, bruised, terrified, but alive, and knew one thing with absolute certainty. This war was just beginning. And before it ended, Jack Dawson would pay for every drop of blood he'd spilled. By the time the sun rose over the valley, 7 homesteads had been hit. 11 people were dead, including 2 children. 20 more were wounded, and Jack Dawson's gang had vanished into the mountains like smoke, leaving behind nothing but blood and ash and grief. Jonas worked through the dawn, helping Tom and the other men tend to the wounded and bury the dead. Margaret's husband would survive, but barely. The youngest Holloway boy had taken a bullet through the arm. Across the valley, families mourned their losses and tried to salvage what little remained of their homes. The wedding, of course, was postponed. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone understood. You didn't celebrate love while bodies were still warm in the ground. Jonas found Evelyn in the kitchen scrubbing blood from the floorboards with savage intensity. Her hands were raw. Her face was pale, and the bruise on her temple where Dawson had hit her had turned a deep purple. Evelyn. Jonas knelt beside her, gently taking the brush from her hands. Stop. You need to rest. I can't. Her voice was hollow. If I stop, I'll think about it. About his hands on me, his gun against my head, the way he smiled. She broke off shaking. Jonas pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. Around them, the house bore scars of the battle bullet holes in the walls, overturned furniture, windows shattered. But they were alive. That had to count for something. I should have been here sooner, Jonas said against her hair. I should have. You were where you needed to be, and you came back. Evelyn pulled away, wiping her face. That's what matters. You came back. Always. Jonas cupped her face, gently mindful of the bruise. I will always come back to you. They sat together on the blood-stained floor, holding each other as the morning light streamed through broken windows, and tried to find strength for what came next. Tom arrived that afternoon with grim news. Dawson's gang split up after the attack. We're tracking multiple groups heading in different directions, some north, some west, some deeper into the mountains. It's like they scattered deliberately to make it harder to follow. They'll regroup, Jonas said, somewhere remote, somewhere defensible. Dawson's smart. He won't risk his men by keeping them exposed. Agreed, but finding them could take weeks, and in the meantime, Tom gestured at the devastated valley. People are terrified. Half the families are packing up to leave. The ones staying are demanding protection we don't have the manpower to provide. What about the territorial militia? 3 days out minimum, and that's if they come at all. The governor's not convinced this warrants military intervention. Tom rubbed his face tiredly. We're on our own, Jonas. 23 men against a gang of professional killers who know these mountains better than we do. Jonas looked out at the valley at the smoke still rising from burned homesteads and felt a familiar darkness settle over him. He'd fought this war before. He'd lost. But this time he had something worth fighting for. We set a trap, Jonas said. Dawson wants me. He made that clear, so we give him what he wants. You're talking about using yourself as bait. I'm talking about ending this before more people die. Jonas met Tom's eyes. Set up patrols, protect the homesteads, keep people safe. But let word spread that I'm riding alone to track Dawson. Make it known that I'm vulnerable, angry, looking for revenge. He won't be able to resist. It's suicide. It's the only way. Jonas glanced back at Evelyn, who was talking quietly with Margaret. I can't let this continue. Every death is on my hands. Every family destroyed, every child orphaned, it's because Dawson wants to hurt me. So let's give him the chance and finish this. Tom was quiet for a long moment. If I agree to this, you don't go alone. I'll have men hidden watching. The moment Dawson shows, no, if he smells a trap, he'll disappear again. It has to be me alone, genuinely exposed. That's the only way he'll take the bait. You're asking me to let you commit suicide. I'm asking you to trust that I can kill him before he kills me. Jonas's voice hardened. I survived the war, Tom. I survived losing everything. I've spent 6 years preparing for this moment. I can do this. Tom studied him, then slowly nodded. All right. But Jonas, if you don't come back, I'm telling Evelyn you made me swear to keep you safe. I'm not taking responsibility for getting you killed. Fair enough. But telling Evelyn was harder than convincing Tom. They stood on the porch that evening watching the sun set over the mountains, and Jonas tried to find the words to explain why he had to ride into almost certain death. "I have to go after him," Jonas said finally. "You know that, right?" "I know you think you do." Evelyn's voice was carefully neutral. "I know you've been carrying this rage for 6 years, and you see this as your chance for revenge. It's not revenge, it's justice. It's suicide." Evelyn turned to face him, her gray eyes fierce. "Jonas, he has a gang. You're one man. Even if you find him, even if you get close enough to shoot his men, we'll kill you." "I have to try." "Why? Why does it have to be you?" Her voice cracked. "Let the marshal handle it. Let the militia come. Why do you have to be the one to die?" "Because I'm the reason they're here." Jonas grabbed her shoulders, his control slipping. "Don't you understand? Every person Dawson killed last night died because he was looking for me. Every child orphaned, every home destroyed. It's my fault. I have to end this." "It's not your fault. You didn't kill anyone. Dawson did. Because I killed 2 of his men 6 years ago. Because I made him my enemy. Because he murdered your family." Evelyn was crying now, angry tears streaming down her face. "You defended yourself, Jonas. You sought justice for Sarah and Emma. That doesn't make their deaths your fault." Jonas felt something break inside him. He pulled Evelyn close, pressing his face into her hair, breathing her in. "I can't lose anyone else," he whispered. "If I don't stop Dawson now, he'll keep coming. He'll keep killing until he destroys everything I care about, including you. I won't let that happen." "Then take me with you." Jonas pulled back, staring at her. "What?" "Take me with you. If you're going after Dawson, I'm coming." Evelyn's jaw set stubbornly. "I can shoot. You taught me, and I won't hide here waiting to find out if you're dead. We face this together or not at all." "Absolutely not. Evelyn, it's too dangerous. And it's not dangerous for you." She grabbed his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Listen to me, Jonas Kincaid. I didn't survive being abandoned and humiliated and attacked just to lose you now. You're mine. Mine to love, mine to protect, mine to fight beside. So if you're riding into hell, I'm riding with you." Jonas wanted to argue, wanted to lock her in the house and ride out alone. But looking into her fierce, determined face, he knew it was useless. His woman was a fighter, and God help him, he loved her for it. "All right," he said finally, "but you stay back when the shooting starts. You stay safe. Only if you do." They sealed the promise with a kiss, both knowing it might be a promise neither could keep. 2 days later, Jonas and Evelyn rode out at dawn. They'd told Tom they were scouting north following reports of Dawson's movements. In truth, Jonas had a specific destination in mind, a box canyon in the high mountains where he and Sarah had once camped, where the cliffs provided only one way in or out. It was the kind of place a man with a wounded shoulder and a scattered gang might choose to regroup. It was also the perfect place for an ambush. They rode hard through the day, stopping only to water the horses and check their weapons. Evelyn was quieter than usual, her face set in determined lines, and Jonas found himself stealing glances at her, memorizing the curve of her profile, the way she sat, her horse, the stubborn tilt of her chin. If they died today, at least they'd die together. That was something. They made camp as the sun set, choosing a defensible position with clear sight lines. Jonas built a small fire while Evelyn prepared their meager supplies. They ate in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. "Tell me about her," Evelyn said suddenly. "Sarah, tell me what she was like." Jonas was quiet for a moment, surprised by the request. Then, "She was tough, tougher than me in most ways. She could birth a calf, mend a fence, shoot a rattlesnake at 20 paces. But she was also gentle. She'd cry over injured birds and sing to Emma for hours." He smiled at the memory. "She used to tell me I thought too much. Said I needed to learn to live in the moment instead of always planning for tomorrow." She was right. Yeah, she usually was. Jonas looked at Evelyn across the fire. "She would have liked you. You're like her in some ways, strong, determined, not willing to take any nonsense from anyone." "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is." Jonas stood and moved to sit beside her, pulling her close. "Evelyn, if something happens tomorrow, Nothing's going to happen. But if it does, I need you to know something. These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You brought me back from a dark place. You made me remember what it feels like to hope. And I love you. I love you more than I thought I could ever love anyone again. Evelyn turned in his arms, tears shining in her eyes. I love you too. And we're going to survive this, Jonas. We're going to get married and grow old together and have a life that Sarah would be proud of. You understand me? Jonas kissed her, then pouring everything he couldn't say into that kiss, his love, his fear, his desperate hope that she was right. They held each other through the night, watching the stars wheel overhead, and when dawn came, they were ready. The box canyon was exactly where Jonas remembered a narrow opening leading to a wide basin surrounded by sheer cliffs. They approached carefully, weapons ready, every sense alert for danger, and found it empty. Jonas dismounted and searched the area, reading signs only a scout would notice. They were here. 3, maybe 4 days ago. Campfires, horse tracks, blood, Dawson's shoulder wound probably, but they've moved on. Where? Evelyn scanned the cliffs nervously. I don't... Jonas froze. In the distance, barely audible, came the sound of gunfire. Multiple shots, rapid and panicked. That's coming from the valley, Evelyn said. Jonas, that's the ranch. Jonas was already mounting his horse. He doubled back. He knew we'd come after him, so he left a trail and circled around. Christ, he's attacking the ranch again. They rode back the way they'd come, pushing the horses to their limits. Jonas's mind raced through horrible possibilities. Margaret and her family were still there. The wounded. Daniel Holloway. Dozens of people sheltering in a place they thought was safe. And Dawson was going to slaughter them all. The sun was high when they finally reached the valley. Smoke rose from multiple locations again, but this time it was concentrated. All the attacks centered on Jonas's ranch. This wasn't about destroying the valley, this was about destroying Jonas. They crested the ridge and saw chaos below. Dawson's entire gang, at least 15 men, had surrounded the ranch house. Gunfire erupted from the windows as Margaret and the others tried to defend themselves, but they were outgunned and outmanned. We have to help them, Evelyn said. We will. But not like this. If we ride in now, we're dead. Jonas scanned the area, his military training kicking in. There, the creek bed. It runs behind the barn. If we can get there unseen, we can come up on their flank. They circled wide, using the terrain for cover, and approached from the east. Jonas could hear Dawson shouting orders, could hear the responding fire from the house growing weaker. They were running out of ammunition. Jonas and Evelyn reached the creek bed and dismounted, moving forward on foot. The barn was 20 yards away, Dawson's men another 30 beyond that. Jonas checked his rifle, his pistol, his knife. Beside him, Evelyn did the same, her face pale but determined. When I move, you cover me, Jonas whispered. Aim for center mass. Don't hesitate. And if I go down, you're not going down. Evelyn gripped his hand fiercely. We do this together. Both of us walk away. Jonas kissed her once hard and fast. Then he moved. He came out of the creek bed low and fast, his rifle already tracking targets. He dropped the first man with a shot to the chest, the second with a shot to the head. Beside him, Evelyn's rifle cracked and a third man fell. Dawson's gang spun around confused, trying to locate the new threat. Jonas kept moving, kept firing, using every bit of cover the terrain provided. 4 men down. 5. 6. Then Dawson spotted him. Kincaid. The outlaw's roar cut through the gunfire. I'm gonna gut you slow. Dawson charged 3 men with him, firing as they came. Jonas dove behind a water trough as bullets chewed through the wood. He came up firing, dropped 1 more man, then heard Evelyn scream. Jonas spun to see her on the ground, a man standing over her with a gun. Without thinking, Jonas fired from the hip an impossible shot, but it connected and the man fell. But in that moment of distraction, Dawson closed the distance. His fist connected with Jonas's jaw, sending him sprawling. The rifle went flying. Dawson kicked him in the ribs, then the head, and Jonas tasted blood. 6 years I've been waiting for this, Dawson snarled, standing over him. 6 years of running, hiding, always looking over my shoulder, and now I finally get to finish what I started. He raised his gun, and Evelyn shot him. The bullet took Dawson in the leg, and he went down hard, cursing. Jonas rolled, grabbed his fallen pistol, and came up shooting. He dropped the last two men standing, then turned to Dawson, who was trying to crawl toward his own weapon. Jonas put his boot on Dawson's hand, grinding down until the outlaw screamed. "How many?" Jonas's voice was cold dead. "How many people have you killed? How many families destroyed? How many children orphaned?" "Go to hell," Dawson spat. Jonas cocked his pistol. "You first." "Jonas, wait." Evelyn was beside him, her hand on his arm. "Don't. Let the law handle him." "The law had 6 years. They failed." "Then don't become like him. Don't let revenge turn you into a killer." Evelyn's voice was urgent, pleading. "Sarah wouldn't want this. Emma wouldn't want this. You're better than him, Jonas. You're better than this." Jonas stared down at the man who'd destroyed his life, who'd murdered his wife and daughter, who'd spent 6 years terrorizing the territory. Every fiber of his being screamed for revenge, for blood, for justice, delivered by his own hand. But Evelyn was right. He lowered the pistol. "Tom, get out here. I've got Dawson." The marshal emerged from the house, followed by Margaret and the others. They'd survived, Jonas realized with relief. Battered and shaken, but alive. Tom took custody of Dawson, binding the wounded outlaw, while 2 of the Holloway boys gathered the surviving gang members. There were only 3 left alive besides Dawson. The rest lay dead in the dirt. Jonas turned to Evelyn and pulled her into his arms. She was shaking, adrenaline and fear finally catching up with her. "You saved me," Jonas said against her hair. Again. "We saved each other." She pulled back to look at him, and Jonas saw something fierce and proud in her eyes. That's what partners do. But the victory celebration was short-lived. Tom approached, his face grim. "Jonas, we've got a problem. While you were gone, Gerald Hart returned. He's got federal marshals with him and warrants for Evelyn's arrest. They're at the hotel in town right now waiting." Jonas felt cold rage flood through him. He can wait forever. She's not going anywhere. "Jonas, these aren't local lawmen. They're federal. If they have legitimate warrants, based on lies." Evelyn's voice was strong despite her trembling. "Gerald forged documents, made false accusations. I never stole anything from him." "I believe you, but proving it—" Tom spread his hands helplessly. "That's going to require time lawyers, maybe even a trial. And in the meantime, they can take you." "No." Jonas's voice was flat final. "That's not happening. What are you going to do, fight federal marshals that'll land you both in prison?" Tom looked between them, his expression pained. "Look, I'll do everything I can to help, but you need to be smart about this. Running will only make things worse." Jonas knew Tom was right, but he also knew that letting Evelyn be arrested, letting her be dragged through courts and accusations, and Gerald's vindictive lies that would destroy her as surely as a bullet, there had to be another way. "How long do we have?" Jonas asked. "They're not coming out here tonight. They're waiting for me to bring her in tomorrow morning." Tom hesitated. "But Jonas, if you don't—" "We'll be there." Jonas's mind was already working, planning. "Tell them we'll come willingly. No trouble." After Tom left, Jonas found Evelyn on the porch, staring out at the sunset. He sat beside her, taking her hand. "We're not giving up," he said. "I know, but Jonas, what can we do if Gerald has federal marshals, if he's manufactured evidence? Then we find evidence that proves he's lying, and I think I know where to start." Jonas stood, pulling her up with him. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we're going to town, and we're going to end this one way or another." That night, Jonas made plans. He sent Daniel Holloway riding to Helena with instructions to find a specific lawyer, a man Jonas had served with during the war, a man who owed him a favor. He wrote letters to people in Boston, asking questions about Gerald Hart's business dealings, his reputation, his past. He gathered every piece of correspondence Evelyn had kept, every receipt, every scrap of proof that she'd done nothing wrong, and he prepared himself for the possibility that none of it would be enough. Dawn came too soon. Jonas and Evelyn dressed carefully, him in his cleanest clothes, her in a simple dress Margaret had lent her. They rode into town side by side, neither speaking, both lost in their own dark thoughts. Cedar Bluff's main street was unusually crowded. Word had spread about the confrontation, and townspeople lined the boardwalks, watching with hungry eyes. Jonas ignored them, focused only on reaching the hotel. Gerald was waiting on the front steps, flanked by 2 hard-faced men wearing federal badges. He looked smug, satisfied, and when he saw Evelyn, his smile widened. Good morning, my dear. I trust you slept well last night. Of freedom is always the hardest, I'm told. Go to hell, Gerald, Evelyn said evenly. Such language. And in front of federal marshals, too. Gerald gestured to the men beside him. Gentlemen, this is Evelyn Hart, the woman I told you about. The thief who stole $500 from my account and fled to avoid prosecution. The older marshal stepped forward, pulling out a set of papers. Miss Hart, I'm Marshal Benjamin Cole. I have warrants for your arrest on charges of theft and fraud. You have the right to... She didn't do it. Jonas moved to stand beside Evelyn, his presence a wall between her and the marshals. Gerald Hart is lying. He abandoned her, humiliated her, and now he's trying to destroy her reputation out of spite. That's a serious accusation, Marshal Cole said. I have proof. Jonas pulled out the letters, the receipts, everything he'd gathered. These show that Evelyn Hart never touched Gerald's money, that she paid for her own boarding, her own supplies, that she was the victim, not the criminal. Gerald's smile never wavered. How convenient. I'm sure those documents are completely legitimate. More legitimate than yours. Jonas turned to the marshal. Sir, I'm asking you to investigate before making an arrest. Talk to the boarding house owner. Check with the bank. Verify Gerald's claims instead of just accepting them. Marshal Cole studied Jonas for a long moment, then looked at Evelyn. Miss Hart, did you take money from Mr. Hart's account? No, sir, I did not. Evelyn's voice was clear, strong. Gerald invited me to Montana with promises of marriage. When he abandoned me, he left me with nothing, no money, no prospects, no way home. Mr. Kincaid took me in and helped me get back on my feet. That's all. I'm not a thief. I'm a woman who was wronged, and now my accuser is trying to compound that wrong with lies. Something flickered in the marshal's eyes, doubt maybe, or sympathy. He turned to Gerald. Mr. Hart, you have bank records showing money was withdrawn. Of course. Gerald produced more papers. $500 withdrawn the day before our scheduled wedding. And you're certain Miss Hart took this money? Who else would have? You perhaps? The new voice came from behind them. Jonas turned to see a well-dressed man approaching on horseback, older, distinguished with sharp eyes and a leather briefcase. Hello, Jonas. Been a while. Richard. Jonas felt relief flood through him. You got my message. I did, and I made some inquiries. Richard Warren dismounted and approached the marshals, extending his hand. Richard Warren, attorney at law. I represent Miss Hart in this matter, and I have information that may interest you, Marshal Cole. Gerald's smile finally slipped. This is highly irregular. What's irregular is manufacturing evidence to frame an innocent woman. Richard pulled documents from his briefcase. I've been investigating Mr. Hart's claims, and I discovered some interesting facts. First, the $500 in question. It was withdrawn by Gerald Hart himself, as evidenced by his signature on the withdrawal slip. Second, Mr. Hart has a history of similar accusations. 3 women in Boston alone have claimed he behaved inappropriately, made promises he didn't keep, and then blamed them when things went wrong. Third, and this is the most damning, the marriage contract Mr. Hart claims Miss Hart signed, the signature is forged. I had a handwriting expert examine it against known samples of Miss Hart's signature, and it's not even a good forgery. Jonas watched Gerald's face go from confident to pale to furious in the space of 3 heartbeats. This is preposterous, Gerald sputtered. Those documents are legitimate, unlike yours. Richard handed everything to Marshal Cole. Sir, I respectfully submit that the charges against Miss Hart are fraudulent. Gerald Hart is attempting to use federal law enforcement to pursue a personal vendetta. I would ask that you dismiss the warrants and investigate Mr. Hart instead for filing false charges. Marshal Cole read through the documents slowly, his expression growing darker. Finally, he looked up at Gerald. Mr. Hart, I'm going to need you to come with me. We have some questions about these allegations. This is absurd. I'm the victim here. Actually, you're not. Marshal Cole's voice was hard. And if it turns out you've been wasting federal resources on a personal vendetta, you're going to face charges yourself. Now you can come willingly, or I can arrest you for obstruction. Your choice. Gerald looked around wildly, seeing the crowd's mood turning against him, seeing his plans crumbling. His eyes landed on Evelyn, and the hatred there was palpable. This isn't over, he said quietly. You think you've won, but it's over, Jonas said. He stepped forward, getting right in Gerald's face. You lost. You tried to destroy her and you failed. Now get the hell out of Montana, and if I ever see you again, I won't be so civilized. Gerald opened his mouth to respond, but Marshal Cole grabbed his arm and led him away. The crowd parted to let them through, and Jonas could hear whispers starting gossip spreading like wildfire about Gerald Hart's lies and Evelyn's vindication. Richard turned to them, smiling. Well, that went better than expected. Jonas, it's good to see you. And Miss Hart, I'm pleased to have been of service. How can we ever thank you? Evelyn asked. Wedding invitation should cover it. I hear congratulations are in order. Jonas looked at Evelyn, saw her smiling through tears of relief, and felt something warm spread through his chest. It was over. All of it. Dawson was captured. Gerald was exposed, and they were free. Finally, wonderfully free. Pastor Williams, Jonas called out. The old pastor emerged from the crowd looking curious. You still available to perform a wedding? Of course, son. When were you thinking? Jonas pulled Evelyn close, grinning. How about right now? The wedding happened in the church an hour later with half the town in attendance. Evelyn wore Margaret's best dress hastily altered. Jonas wore his cleanest shirt and his father's old vest. Pastor Williams performed the ceremony with tears in his eyes, and when he pronounced them man and wife, the church erupted in cheers. Jonas kissed his bride in front of God and everyone, and for the first time in 6 years, he felt truly, completely happy. But as they walked out of the church into the afternoon sunlight, hand in hand, Jonas saw Tom Sutton waiting with a telegram. Sorry to interrupt, Tom said, handing it over. But this just came from Helena. It's about Dawson. Jonas read the telegram, his blood running cold. What is it? Evelyn asked, concern filling her eyes. Dawson's gang had reinforcements. 10 more men camped 30 miles north. They just found out what happened and they're riding this way. Jonas looked up at Tom. How long? 2 days, maybe 3. And Jonas, Tom's voice was grim. They're bringing everyone. This isn't a raid, this is an army. They're coming to burn the entire valley down. Jonas felt Evelyn's hand tighten in his. Around them, wedding guests fell silent, the joy of moments ago evaporating like morning mist. The war wasn't over, it was just beginning. The wedding celebration died before it truly began. Within an hour, Cedar Bluff transformed from a town rejoicing in new love to a community preparing for war. Tom Sutton commandeered the church as a command center, spreading maps across the altar, while ranchers and farmers gathered to plan their defense. 10 men isn't an army, someone said. We beat Dawson's gang once. We can do it again. These aren't ordinary outlaws, Tom said grimly. According to the report from Helena, they're ex-Confederate raiders, hardened killers who've been operating in Texas and New Mexico for years. They don't just rob, they destroy, and they're coming here for revenge. Jonas studied the map, his cavalry training surfacing. We can't defend the whole valley. Too much ground, too few men. We need to consolidate, choose defensible positions, make them come to us on our terms. Where? Margaret's oldest son asked. The church and the ranch. Both have good sight lines, water sources, supply storage. We evacuate everyone else to town, fortify these 2 positions, and prepare for siege. And if they just burn the other homesteads, someone protested. Everything we've built can be rebuilt. People can't. Jonas's voice cut through the murmurs. We save lives first, property second. That's the only way we all survive this. The planning went late into the night. Women and children were evacuated to the church, which sat on high ground with clear views in all directions. The men divided into 2 groups. Half would defend the town under Tom's command. Half would fortify Jonas's ranch under his leadership. Ammunition was distributed, watch rotations, established, escape routes planned. Through it all, Evelyn worked alongside Jonas, her mind sharp and her suggestions practical. She'd learned enough about the valley's geography to offer insights no one else had considered, and Jonas found himself relying on her judgment more than once. You should stay here, Jonas said when they finally left the church near midnight. In town, with Tom and the others. It'll be safer. No. Evelyn's voice was firm. I'm your wife now. Where you go, I go. Evelyn, this isn't about wanting you close. It's about keeping you alive. The ranch is going to be the primary target. Dawson's men will hit it hardest because they know I'll be there. Exactly, which is why you need every gun you can get. She stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression fierce in the moonlight. Jonas, I'm not some delicate flower who needs protecting. I fought beside you once already. I can do it again. I know you can, but no buts. We just got married. We just started our life together. I'm not spending it hiding while you risk your life. She took his hands, her voice softening. I'm scared. Terrified, actually. But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of fighting. Please don't ask me to wait here wondering if you're alive or dead. Jonas pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms. She was right. Trying to protect her by sending her away would only hurt them both. All right, he said finally. But you stay behind cover. You don't take unnecessary risks. And if I tell you to run, you run. Promise me. I promise, if you promise the same. Deal. They returned to the ranch before dawn to find it already transforming into a fortress. The Holloway men had arrived with lumber and tools reinforcing doors and windows. Margaret was organizing supplies in the cellar, food, water, medical equipment, ammunition. Daniel had climbed to the roof to serve as lookout. Jonas spent the day directing preparations with the precision of a military commander. He positioned men at strategic points, established fields of fire, created fallback positions. He checked every weapon, counted every bullet planned for every contingency he could imagine. By sunset, they were as ready as they'd ever be. 23 men and 4 women. Margaret, her daughter Evelyn, and the Henderson widow, who'd insisted on staying to help, gathered in the ranch house for a final meal. It was quiet, tense, everyone lost in their own thoughts about what morning might bring. Jonas stood at the head of the table, looking at these people who'd become more than neighbors. They were friends, family, the community he'd been avoiding for 6 years, and now they were here risking their lives to defend his home. I want to thank you, Jonas said, his voice rough. All of you. You didn't have to come. You didn't have to fight. But you're here anyway, and that means everything. We're here because you're one of us, Margaret said simply. Because when Evelyn needed help, you gave it. When Dawson attacked, you fought back. You've earned this, Jonas. The right to have people stand with you. Besides, Daniel added with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes, where else would we be? This is our valley too, our home, and nobody drives us out without a fight. They raised their cups in silent agreement, and Jonas felt something warm settle in his chest. Whatever happened tomorrow, they'd face it together. That night, Jonas and Evelyn lay in their bed holding each other in the darkness. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. They'd made their choices, prepared as best they could, and now all they could do was wait. I love you, Evelyn whispered finally. I love you too. Jonas kissed her forehead. And when this is over, we're going to have the longest, laziest honeymoon in history. No work, no danger, no drama, just us. Promise. Promise. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms and for a few precious hours found peace. The attack came at dawn. Daniel's shout from the roof woke everyone instantly. Riders 20, maybe 25, coming from the north. Jonas was up and armed in seconds, Evelyn right behind him. They took positions at the reinforced windows while the others scrambled to their assigned spots. Through the gray light, Jonas could see them coming, a ragged line of horsemen spread across the valley, moving fast, firing as they rode. They weren't trying for stealth or strategy. This was pure assault meant to overwhelm through sheer violence. Hold fire, Jonas commanded. Let them get close, make every shot count. The riders closed to 300 yards, 200, 100. Now. The ranch erupted in gunfire. Jonas fired methodically, dropping riders with the precision of his cavalry days. Beside him, Evelyn's rifle cracked steadily. All along the house, the defenders poured fire into the charging outlaws. 6 men fell. 8, 10. But the rest kept coming, returning fire bullets chewing through the reinforced walls. Jonas heard someone scream, one of the Holloway boys hit in the shoulder. Margaret was there, instantly dragging him back, applying pressure to the wound. The outlaws reached the house, some dismounting to take cover, others wheeling around for another pass. Jonas spotted their leader, a tall man with a scarred face and a captain's hat, shouting orders, like this was a military operation, which Jonas realized it was. These men had fought together before, knew each other's moves, operated as a unit. This wasn't going to be a quick fight. "They're flanking Charm," Daniel shouted from the roof. "East side, 4 men." Jonas grabbed 2 men and ran to reinforce that position. They arrived just as the outlaws kicked in the kitchen door. Close quarters fighting erupted, gunfire, knives, fists. Jonas shot 1 man point blank, wrestled another to the ground, felt a blade slice across his ribs before he managed to break the attacker's wrist and put him down. When the kitchen was clear, 3 outlaws lay dead and Jonas was bleeding from a dozen minor wounds. But they'd held. He ran back to the main room to find Evelyn on her knees, reloading frantically. The window she'd been defending was shattered and bullet holes stitched the wall above her head. "You all right?" Jonas pulled her up, checking for injuries. "I'm fine." "But Jonas, they're regrouping. Look." Through the broken window, Jonas could see the surviving outlaws pulling back to a tree line 300 yards out. They were taking cover, setting up for a prolonged siege. "They're going to wait us out," Margaret said, joining them. "Wear us down, then attack again when we're exhausted." "Then we don't give them the chance." Jonas turned to the room. "How much ammunition do we have left?" "Enough for maybe 2 more fights like that," one of the men reported. "Maybe." "Not enough. Not nearly enough." Jonas made a decision. "I'm going out there. If I can get to their leader, kill him, the rest might scatter." "That's suicide," Evelyn said flatly. "It's our only chance. If we stay here, we run out of bullets, and they overrun us. If I can break their command, then I'm coming with you." Evelyn grabbed her rifle. "2 guns are better than 1. "Evelyn, no. We don't have time to argue." She checked her ammunition, her jaw set. "You need covering fire. You need someone watching your back. I'm that someone." End of discussion. Jonas wanted to argue, wanted to lock her in the cellar and go alone. But looking at her fierce, determined face, he knew it was pointless. His wife was a warrior, and God help him, he needed her. "All right, Margaret, you're in charge. We'll try to draw them out, create chaos. When you see an opening, hit them hard." They slipped out the back door into the pre-dawn gray, moving low and fast through the sparse cover. The outlaws were focused on the house, not watching their flanks. Jonas and Evelyn managed to get within 100 yards before being spotted. Then all hell broke loose. Jonas ran toward the tree line, firing as he moved, using every cavalry trick he'd ever learned. Beside him, Evelyn matched his pace, her rifle accounting for 2 men before they'd closed half the distance. They reached cover just as return fire tore through the space they'd occupied seconds before. Jonas reloaded, assessed their position. They were behind the outlaw line, now had the advantage of surprise. "The leader," Evelyn pointed. "There by that big pine." Jonas saw him, the scarred man in the captain's hat, barking orders. If Jonas could get close enough. He moved through the trees like a ghost, all his scout training coming back. 20 yards. 15. 10. The leader turned, saw him, went for his gun. Jonas fired first. The bullet took the man in the chest, spinning him around. He fell hard, coughing blood, and the outlaws around him froze in confusion. "Captain's down," someone shouted. "Captain's down!" Chaos erupted. Some outlaws ran for their horses. Others kept fighting. A few charged Jonas's position, firing wildly. Jonas dropped 2 before his rifle clicked empty. He drew his pistol, shot a 3rd man, then the 4th was on him, tackling him to the ground. They rolled, fighting for control of the gun. Jonas felt fingers scrabbling for his eyes, a knee driving into his gut. Then Evelyn was there, her rifle butt connecting with the outlaw's skull with a sickening crack. The man went limp. Jonas climbed to his feet, breathing hard. All around them, the battle was ending. The outlaws were fleeing, those who could still ride, galloping away into the morning. From the ranch, he could hear cheering. They'd won. But as Jonas turned to Evelyn, relief flooding through him, he saw her eyes widen in horror. "Jonas, behind you." He spun to see the scarred captain, somehow still alive, despite the chest wound, raising a pistol with a shaking hand. Jonas reached for his own gun, knowing he was too slow, knowing this was how it ended. The shot rang out, but it wasn't the captain who fired, it was Evelyn. Her bullet took the man in the head, and he collapsed, finally permanently dead. Jonas stared at his wife, at the woman who'd just saved his life for the 2nd time, and felt something profound shift inside him. She wasn't just his partner. She was his equal, his match, his salvation. "Thank you," he said simply. Evelyn lowered her rifle, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Thank you for not dying. They stood there in the morning light, surrounded by the wreckage of battle, holding each other up, and Jonas knew with absolute certainty that he would love this woman until the day he died. The victory celebration was muted. They'd won, but the cost was evident. 3 men dead, 7 wounded, the ranch torn apart by gunfire. As the women tended the injured and the men dealt with the bodies, Jonas stood on his porch, surveying the damage and trying to feel something other than exhausted. Tom Sutton arrived mid-morning with more news. We got word to the territorial militia. They're sending troops to round up any surviving outlaws. And Jonas, Tom smiled. Dawson's being transported to Helena for trial. He'll hang within the month. It's over. Really, truly over. Jonas felt the words wash over him, waiting for relief or joy or something. Instead, he just felt empty. 6 years of rage and grief and hunting, and now that it was done, he didn't know what to do with the space it left behind. You all right? Tom asked. Ask me in a month. Jonas managed a tired smile. Right now, I'm too tired to know. But over the following days, as the valley began to rebuild, Jonas felt something new growing in that empty space. Hope, purpose, a future that extended beyond revenge and survival. Neighbors arrived to help repair the ranch. Margaret and her family stayed on to help with the work. Daniel volunteered to manage the horses while Jonas and Evelyn focused on rebuilding. The community that had fractured under Dawson's attacks began to knit itself back together stronger for the trials they'd faced. And at the center of it all were Jonas and Evelyn newlyweds who'd earned their happiness through fire and blood. 2 weeks after the final battle, Pastor Williams insisted on holding a proper wedding celebration. You got married in the shadow of war, he said. Now you deserve to celebrate in peace. The entire valley turned out. Tables were laden with food music filled the air, and for the first time in months, people laughed without looking over their shoulders. Jonas danced with his wife under the stars, surrounded by friends, and felt truly, completely happy. This is what I wanted, Evelyn said against his shoulder. This moment, this life, you. You've got me, Jonas promised, for as long as you'll have me. Then I guess you're stuck with me forever. I can live with that. They danced until the moon was high and the music faded to quiet conversation. Then Jonas took his wife home to their rebuilt ranch, carried her over the threshold of their bedroom, and made love to her with a tenderness that spoke of new beginnings and hard-won peace. The years that followed were everything Jonas had stopped believing was possible. In the spring of 1880, Evelyn discovered she was pregnant. Jonas panicked, memories of Sarah's pregnancy with Emma flooding back, but Evelyn was strong and healthy. When their son was born that November, red-faced and squalling and perfect, Jonas held him with shaking hands and wept. They named him James after Jonas's father and called him Jamie. He had Evelyn's gray eyes and Jonas's stubborn chin, and from his first breath, he owned his parents completely. 2 years later, a daughter arrived. They named her Sarah Emma for the family Jonas had lost. The name felt like healing, like permission to honor the past while embracing the future. The ranch prospered. Jonas's skills with horses became legendary throughout Montana Territory. People traveled hundreds of miles to buy his stock or learn his training methods. Evelyn established a seamstress business from their home, creating dresses for wealthy clients in Helena and beyond. Together they built something that was truly theirs, a life, a legacy, a home. The valley thrived too. With Dawson's gang destroyed and peace restored, new families arrived. Towns grew, schools opened, churches multiplied. The wild frontier slowly, steadily became civilized, and the people who'd survived those dark days became the foundation of something lasting. Margaret Holloway and her family became inseparable from the Kincaids. Their children grew up together, shared holidays together, worked side by side through harvests and hardships. When Margaret's husband passed in 1885, Jonas helped her keep the farm running. When Jamie broke his arm falling from a barn loft, Margaret set it with the skill of a trained doctor. They were family in all the ways that mattered. Tom Sutton retired as marshal in 1888, settling into a small house in Cedar Bluff, where he spent his days fishing and telling increasingly exaggerated stories about the Dawson gang to anyone who'd listen. He became Jamie and Sarah's honorary grandfather, teaching them to track and shoot and think like scouts. Gerald Hart never returned to Montana. Richard Warren sent occasional updates. Gerald had been disgraced in Boston, his business had failed, he'd moved to San Francisco to start over. Jonas didn't care. The man was a ghost, powerless and irrelevant. Evelyn never spoke of him, and Jonas never asked. Some wounds healed best when left alone. By 1890, the ranch had become one of the most successful in Montana. Jonas employed 15 men full-time, ran 300 head of cattle, and bred horses that sold for premium prices. He'd built the life he and Sarah had once dreamed of, but with Evelyn it felt richer, deeper earned rather than simply hoped for. Their children multiplied another son in 1886, twin girls in 1889, a final daughter in 1892. The house expanded to accommodate them, all rooms added year by year until it sprawled across the hillside like a small village. Jonas had sworn he'd never have another family after losing Sarah and Emma, but life, he discovered, had other plans. And looking at Evelyn across their crowded dinner table, surrounded by the chaos of 6 children, arguing and laughing and living, Jonas couldn't imagine it any other way. "You ever miss it?" Evelyn asked him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The quiet, the solitude, life before all this. Jonas looked at his wife, gray now, threading through her dark hairlines around her eyes, from years of laughter and sun, still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. "Not even once," he said honestly. "You gave me a reason to live, Evelyn. You and these kids, this life. I'd choose it every single time. Even the chaos. Especially the chaos." Jonas pulled her close. The alternative was dying alone in the dark. This is so much better. The years continued their steady march. Children grew learned, left to build their own lives. Jamie became a lawyer, moved to Helena, married a doctor's daughter. Sarah Emma took over the ranch's horse training operation, her skills surpassing even her father's. The younger children scattered across Montana and beyond, carrying the Kincaid name to new territories. Jonas and Evelyn grew older together, their love deepening with each passing season. They'd seen hardship and joy loss and triumph, and through it all they'd held fast to each other. On their 10th anniversary, Jonas took Evelyn back to the meadow where he'd proposed, where wildflowers grew thick and a stream cut through the grass like silver. On their 15th, they traveled to Boston so Evelyn could finally reconcile with her brother, heal those old wounds, introduce him to the family he'd never met. On their 20th, they stood together on the hillside where Sarah and Emma were buried, Jonas's hand in Evelyn's, and he finally felt at peace with the past. And on their 25th anniversary in the spring of 1904, their children threw them a celebration that filled the ranch to bursting. Jonas stood on the porch of the house he'd built, watching his grandchildren play in the yard, 12 of them now, with more on the way, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. This was everything he'd lost and thought he'd never have again. This was the second chance he hadn't dared hope for. "Quite a legacy," Tom Sutton said, appearing at his elbow. The old marshal was 80 now, moving slowly but still sharp as ever. "You've built something good here, Jonas." "We built it," Jonas corrected. "All of us. The whole valley." "Maybe. But you were the foundation, you and Evelyn. You showed us what it meant to survive, to fight, to keep going, even when everything seemed lost." Tom smiled. "You saved more than just her that night in the rain, you know. You saved all of us." Jonas didn't know what to say to that, so he just clasped Tom's shoulder and let the old man's words settle into his bones. That evening, after the guests had left and the children were asleep and the ranch was quiet again, Jonas found Evelyn in their bedroom, brushing out her long silver hair in front of the mirror. 25 years, Jonas said, leaning against the door frame. "Feels like yesterday and forever at the same time." "I know what you mean." Evelyn set down the brush and turned to face him. "Jonas, I need to tell you something." His heart jumped, old instincts flaring. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right." She stood and crossed to him, taking his hands. "I was thinking about that night. The storm, the church, you standing there in the rain like some dark angel. I was so broken, so lost. I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning. Yes. And I realized you didn't just save me that night. You gave me everything I never knew I needed. A home, a family, a purpose, love that wasn't conditional or fragile, but solid and real and tested by fire. Her eyes were wet now, shining in the lamplight. You were my miracle, Jonas, my second chance, and I would live through all of it again, the pain, the fear, the battles, if it meant ending up here with you. Jonas pulled her close, his own eyes stinging. I was the lucky one. You brought me back from the dead. You made me believe in tomorrow again. Without you, I'd still be alone in the dark, half alive and full of rage. Then we saved each other. We did. Jonas kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then her lips. And we're not done yet. We've got years ahead of us. Grandchildren to spoil crops, to plant sunsets to watch. A lifetime, Evelyn agreed. They stood together in the lamplight, holding each other the way they had that first night in the rain, and Jonas thought about the strange, beautiful journey that had brought them here, about the woman he'd lost and the woman he'd found, about second chances and hard-won happiness, and the way love could bloom even in the darkest soil. That night, lying in bed with Evelyn warm and solid beside him, Jonas whispered the truth he'd carried for 25 years. Her loss was my treasure. Evelyn stirred, pressing closer. And you were mine, she whispered back, all along. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms the way they had for 25 years, the way they would for all the years remaining. Outside, the Montana night was quiet and peaceful, the valley sleeping under a blanket of stars. The ranch would stand for generations, a testament to what two broken people had built together. The children and grandchildren would carry the story forward, telling it to their own children on quiet evenings, keeping alive the tale of the bride left at the altar and the lonely cowboy who saved her. But the truth, the real truth that only Jonas and Evelyn knew in the depths of their hearts, was simpler than any story. They hadn't just saved each other that night in the rain. They'd found home. And in the end, that was all anyone really needed: a place to belong. A person to love, and the courage to keep choosing life even when life seemed determined to break you. Jonas Kincaid and Evelyn Hart had found all three, and they had lived, truly lived, every single day since. The end.